you.
You know what, though?
Staff, let me know when you're ready.
Like, dude, he's trying to do the right thing. Trying to be responsive.
Is that on here?
No worries. You want middle, or are you good where you are?
I'm good here.
All right.
Not out of here, but out.
We'll call the meeting to order for Thursday, February 22nd. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Harlan? Here. Councilmember Bertrand?
Here.
Councilmember Peterson?
Here.
Councilmember Bator?
Here.
Mayor Termini?
Here. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hopefully.
And I believe that we have a presentation tonight from Santa Cruz Metro. Is our Santa Cruz? Yes, there he is. Greetings.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members.
Nothing but good news tonight, right?
You know, better than in the past years.
All right, we'll take
I
it.
think I'm bringing mostly good news today. Thank you for the opportunity. I was reflecting on this earlier this evening. This is my third presentation to you in my nearly 4 years here. So I really appreciate the fact that you welcome me to come talk a little bit about Metro before you engage in all of your other city matters. So thank you again for the opportunity. I always like to start off with a little updated stats about Metro. So this year our operating budget is about $48 million. We employ 300 people. We own 98 fixed route buses and about 41 paratransit vehicles. Our service area population is the entire county, about 264,000. We provide about 5.1 million trips on both the fixed route and the commuter service, and about 75,000 trips on the Paracruz paratransit service. An interesting nugget that not everybody is always familiar with, about 50% of our ridership is composed of UCSC students, faculty, and Cabrillo College students. So that's a pretty heavy-duty statistic, and we're very proud of that. Other times people will ask, how are you funded? How is it that this operation comes together? And I'll tell you just a little bit about that. Our passenger fares, that is the money that people put in the fare box when they board the bus to ride the system, well, that covers about 24% of the entire cost to operate the system. So how do we make up the difference? Well, our residents, voters of the county have been very generous to us. In 1978, they voted a half-cent sales tax. That combined with our share of Measure D equates to about 47% of our operating costs. So when you hear at the state level, you hear at the federal level about self-help, when it comes to transit, you need to show self-help. We are self-help. Our residents, our voters in this county support this system, and they have to such a huge degree that it funds nearly about 47% of the entire operation. 14% comes from state operating funding sources, including the new SB1, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. 9% from federal operating sources. So the feds help us out a little bit. They tend to help us out more on the capital side than the operating side. 8% of the money that we use in operations is flexible money. We could use it over in the capital side of the business, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Now, if you add all of that up, it adds up to more than 100%. That's a good thing because of the fact that it adds up to more than 100%, it allowed the board this year and quite possibly into future years to move $3 million into the capital program so that we can start looking forward to replacing our aging fleet. And I'm going to talk about that in a few moments. But I do want to say thank you to the voters of Santa Cruz County for their support of Measure D, and to the state legislature for their support of SB 1. I know that's important to you. It's important to us as a transit agency that SB 1 passed. It provided us stability in our funding. It provides you opportunities for repairing your local streets and roads, and on a countywide level provides us opportunity not just for transit but for highway repairs and other projects on the highways. All in all, because of SB 1 and Measure D, Metro now, in stark contrast to my message to you over the prior presentations, is now in a position where our 5-year budget outlook is in a stable position, and that's really good news for us. It took a lot of work by our board, and Ed has gone through many, many painstaking meetings to help us get there. We thank you, Ed, for your leadership, and we're in a much better place today. We also want to thank the Cabrillo College students. A year and a half ago, they voted to self-impose a fee upon themselves so that all the students could have a Metro Pass. Unfortunately, that was something went wrong in the way that was designed, and a year later they had to vote on it one more time. We held our breath, and we hoped they still supported us and would vote for that to continue, and they did in much larger numbers than they did the first time. So the Cabrillo Student College students really support Metro, and even if they drive a car, they supported imposing a fee upon themselves so that others could use the transit system. So we're excited about that. Just a couple of nuggets about our service in Capitola. We've met with the new owners of the Capitola Mall, and we're participating in the discussions as they relate to potentially impacting the transit center there. There's some discussion about whether it can move to a different location on site, and we're participating in those discussions. We've also attended the January 24th public meeting hosted by the city and the mall owner. Our surveys, interestingly enough, show that a significant number of riders do ride the bus to that location. Many of them use that location to transfer to other buses. But our recent survey did reveal that 235 boardings and alightings average per day at that location, and about 90 of those riders are actually using that mall, either employees of the mall or using the mall to make their purchases. Metro's provided bus service networks to RTC for inclusion in the Unified Corridor Investment Study. You recall you talked about that recently. We have included a bus rapid transit, or a BRT concept, in that mix, but we've also provided other scenarios, support for other scenarios. For example, if there is a rail in that corridor, you would need bus to interface with that to help people get to their final destinations and help them get to the train stations. So we've provided input on that should that scenario turn out to be the one that's the most viable scenario. Now, although public transit ridership nationwide has been trending down, across the nation it's down about 3% annually, Metro has been maintaining, or at least increasing a little bit, its overall ridership. And that's primarily due to our partnerships with UCSC and Cabrillo College. Again, they're 50% of our ridership, so their numbers are up a little. The other general ridership is down a little, but overall we're relatively stable. So that's good news. What are the contributing factors? Well, every jurisdiction across the nation have some different factors that influence ridership being down a little bit. We've looked at it, and contributing factors, we think, are car ownership per household, particularly among lower income households, are up. As we all know, gas prices have been down for a very prolonged period of time. That doesn't help us over on the transit side of the business. In California, we had AB 60 Alejo in 2015, which allowed undocumented residents to be able to obtain driver's licenses, and the data is now coming in on that, and the data actually shows that there is an increase in the number of driver's licenses issued annually per capita, and that is higher than the previous metric was displaying, which was more of a stable number. And then, of course, increased traffic congestion, which slows down public transit on Highway 1 and Highway 17, doesn't just impact folks in their single-occupant vehicles, it impacts our transit system, and that has increased 10% average daily traffic volumes over the last 5 years. If our buses go slower, it can be a little less appealing for people to ride the system. So I think we all have an interest in having that highway function better and more efficiently. For those Capitola residents that commute over the hill, Metro's introducing 2 new morning commuter period Highway 17 express trips, one in each direction to meet demand. So that's real exciting. One of those trips in particular used to leave Pacific Station downtown and then at Mount Herman divert over to the Scotts Valley Transit Center and then come back. If you're riding that trip and boarding at Pacific Station, once you get on Highway 17, you want to keep going over the hill. And so that's the nice change that we've instituted there. Routes that service Capitola are performing well. Your 69A and 69W, which operate between Watsonville and downtown Santa Cruz via the Capitola Mall, both have some of the higher riderships at 30 average per trip, which is a really good number. Routes 66 and 68 operate between Capitola Mall and downtown Santa Cruz via Live Oak. They have steady ridership at 16 to 13 trips per passengers per trip. And Route 55, which operates between Capitola Mall and Rio Del Mar via Pacifica via Cabrillo College, also have healthy levels of ridership at 16 per trip. So your ridership in these corridors servicing Capitola Mall in particular are very robust and good. Legislative-wise, beginning to bring it to a close, tomorrow at our board meeting, our board will entertain the motion to adopt a resolution that will be in support of Proposition 69 on the June ballot and against the effort to overturn SB 1 on the November ballot. Now, for all of those who may be watching on TV and those in the audience, Proposition 69, vote yes, please. That is the one that tells the legislature, constitutional amendment that tells the legislature that if they run into problems with their general fund, deficits or whatever, they can't raid SB 1 transit money. The state has done that in the past. They have a pattern of doing that. This makes sure that that does not happen, except when you meet a super high threshold in order to be able to come after those dollars. And then the effort to avoid overturning SB 1, that's on the November ballot. That's important. Again, as I stated before, it's important to our budget, our ability to have a balanced budget, our ability to buy capital equipment like buses, your ability to do the aggressive things that you plan to do with SB 1 to maintain your local streets and roads, and on a county level, not just to support the transit system, but our highway system. So we encourage the voters of the county to look real seriously at those. If they want to learn more about it, they can go to www.fixcaroads.com. That's a website that was established sometime back, www.fixcaroads.com. That's a good place to learn all the good things that SB 1 is doing for the state of California. So in closing on that point, Proposition 69 in June, yes. Effort to repeal SB 1 in November, no. Finally, we're working hard to develop a plan to replace our 62 buses. Our fleet, 98 buses, 62 of them are over the age. Our average age of our buses should be about 6.5 to 7 years. Our average age of buses are 12 years. That is way too old of a fleet that we're operating, and it affects our ability to deliver quality service because as the fleet ages, buses tend to break down more often. This is a significant challenge. It will take us $38 to $62 million to replace 62 buses. So $38 million, if we had $38 million that fell off out of the sky today, we could replace 62 buses with compressed natural gas or CNG buses. If we had 62 million, we could replace them all with zero-emission electric buses, which is the direction our agency is now going, and that CARB, or California Air Resources Board, is actually going to compel us to do sometime this year. They're moving towards adopting a regulation that would have us, transit agencies across California, operate 100% zero-emission buses by 2040. So that's a lot. I thank you again for the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions, Council? Alex, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. So I'd like to have a report on closed session, please.
No reportable action this evening.
Thank you. Are there any additional materials? City Clerk?
We received 35 public comments for item 9A, 7 of which were received after noon today, and those are on your desk, and they're all available in the back of the packet. And we received 1 item for 9B, a correction to the staff report.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Staff
City
has
Manager.
one correction to item 8C, which is on your consent calendar. There was a typo in the staff report. The agenda item properly references that this is a item pertaining to the Finance Advisory Committee membership. The resolution is correct. There's a typo in the staff report that mentions the Library Advisory Committee. So that, just note that for the record.
Very good. We'll go on to public comments. These are public comments for items not on tonight's agenda. Does anyone have a comment on an item that is not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to City Council Treasurer staff comments. Mr. Treasurer, anything to say?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Termini. The Finance Advisory Committee met yesterday. We talked about a couple of things. One is we got a chance to preview our Finance Director's Jim Marburg's presentation that he's going to give us tonight. I'd like to point out that the Advisory Committee agreed with his recommendations. There was no serious critique or objections to his recommendations. Secondly, on your consent calendar, item E, I'd just like to make a comment on that. That's the fact that we have now are requesting you approve a new accounting agency for city audit. And I think it's important to just point out that that's what we're doing and how important that activity is. Jim spent a lot of time going out, getting proposals. We received 7 detailed proposals for that work, for auditing services. We narrowed that down to 3. We had 3 face-to-face interviews. And I'd like to thank Marilyn Warder for volunteering for that activity. So, so between staff, myself, and Marilyn, we worked hard on selecting the appropriate auditor, which I hope you will approve. I'd like to point out that, again, the idea of an auditor is very important, and one of the things that I was looking for in particularly was not a rubber stamp organization, not someone who was going to report to the finance director, but someone who's reporting to the city council and is looking for irregularities and making sure that the funds are where they are and going where they're supposed to be, and everything's according to the general accounting principles. The other thing reason I want to bring this up is because we also looked for presentation skills, and the guys we selected are very large. They're, I think, the largest state auditor, or largest auditor of state government municipalities there is, and they also have their senior partner is very eloquent, and hopefully he will be able to give you a presentation that is clear and concise and educational, and I'm hoping that when it is time to do the midterm audit, or maybe at least the final audit, that you will accept a presentation from that audit activity and let the public know that we are working hard to make sure that that our finances are in order and everything's going where it's supposed to be. So I hopefully Veronique, Trin, and Day will help provide that assurance. Thank you.
Very good. Staff, do you have any comments?
No staff comments tonight.
We do have the instructions. We have been looking into the best practices to help improve the flow and public access for our public comments. And we're trying a new system tonight for item 9A, the jewel box calming. Hopefully everyone saw the information as they came in. If you wish to speak on the item, we have 3 different color cards. If you choose a green speaker card, that means that you wish to speak about 1 minute. And you get to go first. So this is if you want to say your piece and get out of here, or just be one of the early speakers, this is your choice. Number 2, yellow, about 2 minutes. Third is the orange card, which gives the full 3 minutes. It is your choice which card you choose, and it is your choice how much information you provide us. You do not have to fill it out. You can drop a blank card. Hold on to the cards until your different groups are called, and you just drop them in the box here as you make your statements. And if you did not get a card and you need some help, there is staff in the back. Is Larry there? Or is he setting? He was working on our air conditioning. But the chief is back there, and he can direct you to cards. Look for the police chief if you need a card. So thank you very much as we try a new approach to give everybody a chance to say their piece. Thank you.
I might note this is in no way meant to dampen your public input. If everyone wants an orange card, so be it. No problem. My big goal was to get rid of that clipboard up there that everyone had to walk up and spend a minute just trying to fill it out. So it's all done already. Fill out as much as you want. Give us the information you want, drop it in the box, and you're talking. So it's so that we can get as many people to speak to us. It is not to truncate your comments. So we'll move on to council comments. Ed.
I have none.
Kristen.
Just a quick reminder that this weekend on Saturday, the Capitola Historical Museum is having an orientation for the new exhibit for anyone who's interested in volunteering. Volunteer shifts are about 2 hours. There's no minimum requirement for how often you should be volunteering, but I started volunteering about 3 years ago, and it's been a great experience. So I highly recommend it. It will be at 9:30 over here in the community room. For the orientation for the new exhibit at the museum.
Thank you. Jacques.
Yes. So I've two comments. One is a lot of you know there's going to be a nationwide march, and there's going to be one in Santa Cruz supporting the children that have started this whole nationwide movement basically because of recent killings in Florida. Very, very, I don't know how to say it, but I think this has affected a lot of us. And so I just encourage a lot of people to look for the date of that march and participate. The second thing is, I've already talked to you, Jamie, about this. What is our response in conjunction with the school district when there's issues on the campus? What programs or plans do we have to support them when they need it from our police department? And I'm looking forward to that another day, not right now, but I do believe that there are plans that are already worked out. I just want the community to know that we've actually addressed those things and we're prepared for any circumstance.
Thank you, Jacques. Stephanie.
I have two requests. First, I'm not crazy about this new system because I don't think all of you know how long you're going to speak unless you timed your speech at home, whether you need 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes. I like government to be open, friendly, available, where you don't have to practice your speech and get the correct color card. So we can try this as a trial, but I'm not in favor of making government any more cumbersome than it already is. Second thing is I'd like to have us have the Soquel Creek Management Plan come back to us for review in the next 60 days and put some money in our budget to implement many of the programs that are in there. I've spoken with Don Alley, and there are lots of things in there that we could be doing that we're not doing, and so I'd like to bring that back and put some money in the budget for that.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Steve, I'm so glad you're up there. I have a couple of questions specifically for you. Depot Hill Steps, or as I like to call them now, the Yellow Brick Road. Can you explain what our thought process was and if we carried it out the way you envisioned it?
Good evening, Mayor Termini. No, the Public Works Department was asked to color the noses of them for contrasting sake to make them more visible. When the crews went out there to paint it, they ran into a problem with the stenciling that they had developed to paint the front part of the nose, and in their beautiful wisdom decided to paint the entire fronts yellow. So if there's concern with that, we can certainly rectify it in some way, but that was their intent. And that's the outcome.
I'm hearing from a lot of people that it's more dangerous now than it's ever been because it looks like a big yellow ramp, and maybe we can get a contrasting color for the risers so that people actually know where the steps start and stop. Second question, we've talked a lot about the predictive traffic signals that we have on 41st Avenue, and I think we were able to implement some of it, but Caltrans stopped us from doing anything with the lights over the Highway 1 overpass, which is where everyone queues up and it's a complete cluster. Is there any wisdom to asking the public to write to Caltrans and say, come on guys, help us out here because you are stopping all the traffic from moving fluidly down 41st Avenue?
So the Caltrans does maintain and operate the three signals over the overpass, one at the northbound off-ramps, one at the southbound off-ramps, and also the one at Gross Road and 41st. I will say that timing those are very difficult because they basically, everything on the northbound ramp, for example, both phases, there's only 2 phases, they both just push more traffic onto 41st. When you get to Gross Road, you're looking at 5 phases with the cross traffic on Gross Road, so there's really no timing you can do to try and coordinate those phasings very well. With that said, Caltrans' goal is to try and minimize the backup on the freeway, not necessarily dealing with the backup on 41st Avenue. I've been in contact with them. They're continuing to adjust them. Sometimes the adjustments help. Sometimes, from our standpoint, sometimes they hurt. I can't say whether or not reaching out to Caltrans and who the right person is to reach out to Caltrans from the public standpoint, but I can promise you we're continuing to work on it. And as regard to phasing and timing the other intersections, which are from Clare Street down to Jade Street, we have not implemented that project. It came in way over bid, and we're waiting for the Air Board grants to try and supply some additional money for that.
But it is true that Caltrans refused to participate in that predictive light timing program.
Yeah, they do not have that. They do not allow that kind of signal timing to go on. They've allowed us to put in clocks so that they're all operating on the same time. And that's their standard across the state, is not to put that timing in.
They're worried about backing up on Highway 1. Have they been out at Highway 1 recently? I'm sorry. That was a rhetorical question. Okay, we'll move right along then and go into the consent calendar. The consent calendar are a group of items that are considered on a single vote. Is there anyone on the council or the public that would like to pull any of the items? Jacques, question, or do you want to pull an item?
I could comment on 6.
Please do.
Okay, so I reported 2 items last meeting. One dealing with something.
Hold it. What is item 6? I'm seeing.
Oh, excuse me.
This is the consent calendar.
Yeah, it's the minutes. Number 6 on the minutes from the last meeting.
On
item A.
Okay, item A.
Item A.
Number 6.
Number 6,
Got
sorry.
it.
Yeah, so I reported 2 things. One that Mike and I have been very concerned about. You captured that. The second one you did not capture. I was probably a little muddled in explaining it. But basically at the last RTC meeting, George Gendero did report that Kimberly Horn is developing the methods used in the Unified Corridor Study. And then I got him to say that he will report that back to the RTC so the public and the RTC knows the methods that they're going to use. And I just want that captured.
Any other items? Then I'll consider a motion.
Motion to approve consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jacques. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And you received that correction. Excellent. We're going to move on to general government public hearings. Consider Jewel Box traffic calming implementation and funding plan. Staff report, please.
Again, good evening, Mayor Termini and Council. Item before you is to look further into the Jewel Box traffic calming, which we last discussed on January 25th. To give us a quick background on that meeting on the 25th, the City Council directed staff to prepare a 6-month trial of traffic calming measures in the Jewel Box, identified as option 4 in the survey, the community survey that we had done. This traffic calming option involved a series of barricades along 47th Avenue, basically preventing any cut-through traffic from traveling through the Jewel Box. Staff, since that approval, staff has consulted with the Coastal Commission staff and determined that this project requires a coastal development permit. In addition, CEQA review must be completed before we move forward with the project. So just touch on those items really quickly here. The coastal development permit, the entire project is located within the coastal zone and then what's known as the non-appealable area. That means the permit will be issued by the city and is not appealable to the Coastal Commission. To get this permit, we will need to develop plans showing, the design of the barricades, exactly how we're going to put them, the required signage and striping, and to comply with CEQA. Moving forward, looking at CEQA compliance, a 6-month trial would be required to fully comply with CEQA. That would involve an initial study, an impact analysis, traffic modeling, and would likely result in a mitigated negative deck or an environmental impact report. To prepare those documents and complete the modeling, we estimate the cost to be $75,000 to $100,000.
Thank you.
Yeah. Depending on the which document we have to proceed with. A CEQA exemption does exist for a short trial period for data collection purposes. In this plan, we're recommending a 30 to 45-day trial period in which a traffic collection will be taken, and that'll then be used for subsequent CEQA documents if we wanted to proceed. So to prepare the plans and the permitting for that, and then do the modeling, most of the, or the traffic monitoring would be $50,000 that we'd need. Most of that money is in the traffic collection, data collection, and modeling that will be done. So tonight you have several options. We've tried to lay them out. These probably aren't an exhaustive list of options, but at this point you could direct staff to proceed with a short-term 35-day trial in lieu of the 6-month trial and appropriate $50,000 from fund balance and utilize a CEQA data collection exemption. Or you could appropriate $100,000 from fund balance and direct staff to proceed with planning, permitting, and CEQA review for a 6-month trial of option 4, or finally, you could direct staff to develop alternate toolbox traffic calming measures for future council consideration. That's it.
To be clear, a couple of questions. So at tonight's meeting, we could do two things. We could either go forward with the previous council direction, allocating the funds that you've enumerated, or we could eliminate that and abandon that program and move to a different program. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Or instruct staff to pursue a different program, right, or research a different program.
That'd be correct. You can give us, we're here, we probably should have had a lot of this information at the meeting a month ago when we the cost on implementation. You gave us marching orders at that meeting to move forward on trying to move forward the six-month trial. You can now come back and say we want to modify that, move forward with a shorter trial, or abandon it altogether and move forward with the development of other plans.
Very good. And any other questions of staff? One last question, and this is in regard to obtaining traffic data. Kimberly Horn is our traffic expert. What is the recommendations with regard to, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, however many times we want to collect data? What's their direction as far as what's the common wisdom for the number of days, time of the week, the year? I mean, there's been a lot of questions raised about that. So educate us on that.
So the standard Caltrans for a traffic impact study, which is what you're looking for here, would be the collection of a single day traffic, given that that's on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday. The thinking there is they're collecting AM and PM peaks. Those tend to be the highest, and they're highest on during the week. So what they're proposing is collecting traffic counts on 3 different days, one before we do any implementation of traffic calming there, one about 2 weeks after they've been in place so people have had a chance to adjust their routines, and then a second one just to make sure we get all the data we need about a week later. Each of those are a single day. That is the standard. If you look at our general plan traffic data, all those modeling were done on single day counts.
And that procedure could take place either for option 4 or for some other option you may bring back to us should we abandon option 4.
Right. And where we would model and or monitor and what counts we take would depend on what we decide to go forward with.
Has anyone considered what the plus and minus is in accuracy on a traffic monitoring day?
I'm not aware of a percentage there that I could give you. I could certainly check into that and get back, but I do know that even federal studies only use a single day count for that. So that appears to be the accepted standard.
Got it. Okay. Now we'll go
want
off.
to get chairs for people before we start in the community room?
Do we have the community room open? Can we roll some chairs in? I'm sorry, they don't roll anymore. Can we bring some chairs in? Yes. And there they go.
We could bring chairs or we could open up the community room.
I would like to call up all of the yellow card folks.
Green.
Green? Sorry. This is my first day on this job. I'm awfully sorry. Mr. Treasurer.
I just want to ask a question since
Please
we're talking
do.
about $50,000. Of all the other options that were brought up, speed bumps, one-way signs, this and that, does we need to do the CEQA activity for all of those?
In rerouting traffic, you have to look at CEQA and determine kind of the impact. So yes, there would be some analysis. I don't know if they would all necessarily be as detailed as this one, given the complexity of the amount of traffic we're moving with this option. But yes, it's to a certain level, there has to be a CEQA compliance with all of them.
That's an exit. It's the state requirement for the environmental quality of our city. And let me just expand on your question. Are there certain things, like I've been informed that things like traffic bumps or tables and instructive signage will not require?
Right, because it's not rerouting any traffic.
Right.
It is, slowing down traffic and placement of signs. We may need coastal development permits, but CEQA would in almost all cases be exempt in that case.
The application of pain does not require CEQA, and discomfort. But if we actually move traffic down a different street or in a different direction, that does.
We need to look at that. Yes.
Very good. Which card is first, Linda?
Green.
Green cards, please. Come on up. Drop your card and speak, if there are any. I see a few. Come on up. You're first. Don't be shy. Molly, drop your card and roll. And timer, please.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Molly Ording, and I am the chairman of the Capitola Parking and Traffic Commission, as well as a fellow involved Capitola neighbor. I come to you tonight as a resident and a concerned community member regarding your approval of what has come to be known as the Jewel Box Traffic Calming Option 4. I continue to be very concerned for our Topaz residents who are suffering from the untenable and dangerous effects of an incontrovertible amount of cut-through traffic and related speeding on their narrow 2-block-long street. It is my sincere hope that we can all come together tonight and agree that doing nothing for our Topaz neighbors is not an option. The option that you agreed upon at your last meeting may be revised or rescinded, but I cannot urge you strongly enough to not abandon these residents by doing nothing. Please, all of us, let's work together in the spirit of mutual respect, understanding, and cooperation towards a solution which will work the best for the majority of those affected. It may well not be perfect for all, but we will not be abandoning our fellow Capitola residents.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you very much.
Next. Welcome.
My name is Mel Bento, and I live on Topaz Street in the Jewel Box. I just wanted to say a couple things. One, I feel like there's a lack of awareness by the general public about the work that we've done for the last year. So we came to the City Council, we went to the Traffic and Parking Commission, we came back to the City Council, who directed us back to the Traffic and Parking Commission, and there seems to be a lot of talk about this being kind of rammed through, and I think there's just a lack of awareness of what has been going on. And anyway, there's been a lot of involvement, and I would ask that everyone be compassionate and listen to what might be an option. We may not have the right answer today, but I think that if everyone is willing to be patient and look into what's available, we can find a solution that fits all of us.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. I was here at the last meeting, and I made a pledge that I was going to change my driving pattern to benefit the people who are having a problem in their lives. And I was able to do that. And I think that if we can educate people that there is a problem and that we need to change our driving patterns, that we need to be diversified, and that we need to maybe approach the hotels on 41st Avenue when they give out restaurant recommendations to give them a different path for them to travel, for the driving schools that use the Jewel Box to let the young drivers learn how to drive. All of these things, I think, is through education. And if we all join together, then we can maybe, hopefully, satisfy us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Shellhorse, and I live on 45th Avenue in a house that my grandfather built in the 1950s. He picked 45th Avenue because it was the quiet street. It looked out to the orchard. He didn't want to be in the busy part of the Jewel Box. I'm here tonight to urge you to please look at the safety issues, whether it's on Topaz or any of the other streets. 45th Avenue has become a speedway. I think that was clear in the survey. I watched the city council meeting from home last time, and it seemed like speed and safety was a main concern of the residents, but it didn't seem to be addressed at the meeting. So I just want you to know that as a mother, safety on 45th Avenue and the Jewel Box streets is my primary concern.
Thank you very much. Next. Anyone else with a green card? There we go. Welcome.
Hello. I'm Dan Hastings. I live on Crystal Street. Appreciate the time to talk to you. I'm against the idea of putting up barricades in the neighborhood. I think it's just an eyesore. It's going to cause more traffic and congestion on the streets. Unawareness of the blockades being there is going to be a big issue. I'd rather take the $100,000 and spend it elsewhere. Something as simple as signs, or doing a study as far as one-way streets. Another option would be a better option to look at before doing such a very expensive construction.
Very good. Thank you. Next. Anyone else have a green card? Oh, there we go. There's a green card. Not to be confused with a green card. Okay.
My name is Molly Gressley, and I live in the Jewel Box on Garnett Street. And I've lived in Capitola for over 20 years, and I have lived in the Jewel Box for 20 years this spring. I have 5 children, and we are very opposed to barricades in the neighborhood. We specifically bought a home in the Jewel Box and in Capitola to be part of this side of Capitola, which is part of the Pleasure Point area and the Opal Cliff area. We are part of numerous carpools that go to SoCal High, to New Brighton, that involve the Opal Cliff neighbors, to all kinds of sports. I can't even begin to enumerate them. And it is very divisive to have just not to be able to go through our neighborhood to access the places we go on a day-to-day basis. And I am very open to listening to our neighbors and helping make something work, but I would like to do it that is not a barricade, and perhaps signs or something that would help them, that would help all of us. Thanks.
Thank you. Next. Is there anyone else with a green card? Oh, there we go. Really? A green card for you? I am moved to my core, truly.
Yeah. You have 5 green cards, right?
My name is Ron Burke. I'm a member of the Jewel Box community. And I say member because I'm one of many in the community. The problems we experience are very real. Topaz Street has probably the most strongest and the most recent problem of the cut-through we have through the neighborhood. If you look on your map, it'll be really obvious the fact that people come through on Brommer to Jade, that cut through up 45th, 7th, 9th, what have you. Portola up 47th, sometimes up 49th. It's a real problem. And the ones on Topaz definitely experience it. The solutions, I have my own ideas. I'm not here to proffer those. I'm not the professional one to do so. I will say back in 1999, when a committee of 7 of us got the speed humps in, which was a big undertaking to get those in, that's been very effective to slow the cars down. Still, it does not deter the traffic as a cut-through. What it comes down to is either you need to block the streets off, as proposed in boldness, or open every street up. And I want to mention also, as we pledge allegiance to the flag, we are a republic. That means we're representative democracy. The decisions you make are in accordance in their support of our community, not of the popular vote, but what's right to do. Thank you for leadership.
Thank you, Ron. There we go. Welcome.
My name is Mike Gerard. I live on Opal Street, and I just have to echo the sentiments of the previous speaker. There isn't a solid solution here that's going to work for everybody. I would be opposed to spending $150,000 of the taxpayers' dollars for additional studies. I don't think that solves the problem, and I wouldn't support any type of a solution that reroutes cut-through traffic through other parts of the neighborhood. Topaz Street definitely does get a lot more traffic. I think we all know that by now by the previous study. But any type of barricade that, or one-way street that only impacts Topaz Street is just going to be a pig in a python, and it's going to push other traffic to other streets. So it would not support the one-way down Topaz.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call. Okay, we move on to the yellow cards now. Is that correct? Yellow cards. Any 2-minute cards? Welcome, Brett.
I'm Brett Gressley. I live in the Jewel Box as well, and on Garnett Street. I've been a big fan of walkability. I helped build the, or did the fundraising for the stairs on the bluff 20 years ago. But to put barricades in a neighborhood, I just think it's a crazy idea. It will, as my wife said, it will reduce carpools for kids. It makes it extremely difficult to get to Pleasure Point. The beach and the whole south end, or the south end of 41st. Safety, for instance, going to urgent care in Soquel, it'll be difficult to get there. It'll divide our Jewel Box up into sections, and it'll be extremely difficult to get to soccer games at Jade Street as well. So I vote no on the barricades. Open to many other ideas in speed bumps, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Next. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening. My name is Jim Sherman. I'm here to speak. I was here 2 weeks ago to speak. I'm opposed to these barricade ideas. I thought it was a very poorly planned idea. It takes a small problem and forces it out to everybody in the neighborhood, and affects all our lives. The last meeting we talked about it. I left with the impression that it was going to be tabled and we were going to come up with some other ideas. I was very disappointed to see that things turned around and said, no, we're going to move ahead with this. I felt betrayed, to say the least. I talked to many of my neighbors. They felt similarly. This morning I went down for a walk down with my dog on 47th Street between 8:30 and 9. You know how many cars I counted? 12. Out of those 12 cars, most of them were people taking their kids to schools. You're going to make their lives much more difficult and they don't want it. It's a bad idea. It was a bad idea then. It's a bad idea now.
Understood. And just to be clear, I did announce 2 weeks ago that we would have to bring it back in order to make it not happen, should we decide that way. So we're not trying to blindside anyone. We had to bring it back as a matter of procedure to tonight's meeting. So sincerely, we weren't trying to resurrect a dead body. This is just the process it's going to take to do it. So my apologies if I wasn't clear on that.
Okay, thank you.
Next. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jim Donaldson. Let's see. Unfortunately, there's no way that I've seen to reduce cut-through traffic without moving it to a nearby street. I believe this entire traffic discussion started with safety concerns. Topaz residents expressed concern about unsafe conditions for pedestrians, cyclists, and pets, and 2 cars that were sideswiped. I've seen some good suggestions online and through these discussions. I think the following address the concerns as potential options. Number 1, install curbs, gutters, and sidewalks in the full width of the city right-of-way. The city owns the property for, say, 3 feet from the curbs. Many residents of Topaz currently use this area, but it belongs to the city. So put in sidewalks on all of Topaz. I believe this could be done at the property owner's expense with minimal cost to the city. So put on sidewalks on Topaz. This would provide a safe walkway for pedestrians and pets. Number 2, you could limit parking to one side of the street. A wider roadway would reduce the risk of sideswiped cars. Paint bike lanes. This would address concerns for biker safety. Finally, install speed bumps to ensure speeds do not increase as a result of a less crowded, wider street. Maybe some of this would work. Maybe all of it would work. But it allows Topaz to solve the Topaz problem. I believe there's community precedent for this approach. For the high speeds on 45th, 47th, and 49th years ago, traffic was not diverted to other streets, was not It was not diverted at all. Instead, speed bumps were installed. Measures were taken on those streets to make those streets safer. So I asked the council to rescind their decision to install the barricades, asked the council to recommend pursuing the above suggestions or some combination of other less significant changes. And I don't support significant changes to establish traffic patterns in order to appease a small group of folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. And again, we're doing the yellow cards right now. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Hobbs. My wife Jan and I live on Topaz Street between 45th and 47th. And first of all, I'd like to say that we are very appreciative to Mayor Termini and the council for taking the time to address this issue. And we realize that this is a contentious issue and it's not something that is easily taken on. So that being said, we were a little taken aback that option 4 was the option that was chosen at the meeting. And while some of us, after looking at it, thought, well, this would really probably stop all the traffic going through the jewel box, we are very mindful of the fact that it really is an issue that is very invasive for everybody else all the way up who have not experienced the problems that we have on Topaz Street. And so we had a meeting. I've spoken to most of the neighbors, and the general consensus on Topaz Street among all the neighborhood is that we would really like to see a trial period with just some one-way signs going toward, directing traffic toward Santa Cruz. And since we can't know where the cars are going to go, we have no way of knowing what's going to happen with any of this until it actually happens. A trial period with this would be minimally invasive and easily abandoned if it turns out to be a catastrophe for the rest of the neighborhood. And so we think this is a reasonable response to the problem. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Next. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Sue Crawford, and I live on the corner of 47th and Opal. And I just have a couple of things to say. The speed bumps were a great idea, but they do not work. I used to work every day. Now I'm home every day. And the cars that fly down 47th, the motorcycles that fly down and race down 47th, we have kids, we have grandkids. You can't let them outside. I don't know. I would be all for trying the barricades for a while. We have, I think, the one four-way stop on 47th and Topaz. The one on Opal and 47th is just a two-way stop. I've seen several people blow through that stop sign and almost cause an accident. So I think if we at least try barricades, it might slow people down. I don't know if it's, a forever solution, but I think it would help and our neighborhood would be a little safer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Bill Mcdonald, and I also live on 47th. 47th and Jewel Street on the corner. And we have owned that property for close to 20 years. We have lived in the property now for a couple of years. And I'll tell you, it's amazing how bad the traffic on 47th is, particularly at rush hour. And when we bought the property, that's a 40-foot wide street. And I know there's no parking allowed on either side of the street, but still, it was not considered to be a pass-through street at the time that we bought it. It was a neighborhood street, and it certainly has changed. And I guess I'm not aware of all the plans exactly that you have right now, but I just wanted to voice my opposition to leaving it just the way that it is. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Jake Gressley. I go to SoCal High School, and
I just wanted to piggyback on what my mom said earlier. We live on Garnett Street, and we use that topaz and just the neighborhood in general just a lot for getting to our friends' houses and for carpools. And every morning we carpool to school, and we couldn't do it without using like those roads. And so I just think that it wouldn't just hurt like us living in the Jewel Box, but it would also hurt people living in Pleasure Point, and just 50 other of my friends that I know really use those streets in that area every day. And so I just want to say that the blockades are not a good idea, but maybe speed bumps or something like signs to slow the speed limit down would work a little better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gressley. Well done. Next. Step right up.
My name is Marcos Vasquez. I live on Topaz, and I decided to stand up because I'm actually friends with the Gressley family, and so they basically drive through our street. Every day I see them drive through. They are also people who cut through our street to go to different places. And I just wanted to remind, I already said that here the last time, is that, I'm concerned with safety, and I'm thinking about 2 weeks ago was in the sentencing of the man who killed a friend of mine on a car accident. And I saw how devastating it is when we have, for all the families, even for the family of the man who killed my friend. So I'd like to, that's my fear. We have like all these people walking. We are there every day. We're seeing the danger. Come summertime, we have the kids who 4 times a day, the kids from the school, there's like, 20 kids walking down to the lifeguard. And I just cannot imagine that, is something going to happen, someone going to get killed. And that's what I want you guys to think about. Okay, we're not talking about how fast I go anywhere and come back. This is about safety stuff.
Come on back to the microphone. Come on, stay with me.
Yeah, so that's what I want to remind everyone. And I want everyone else to join. And like the most important thing besides safety is for us to get together as a community. I love the Gressley family. I hope that we're all going to hang out in this beautiful neighborhood. So
thank you very much. Next.
I'm Bill Gray. I live at 1440 Prospect. My family has owned that property since 1921. It seems to me like this action is like using a sledgehammer to nail a gnat. We ought to be looking at the least intensive activity that could solve the problem. And instead, it seems to me that we have quickly embraced the most egregious sort of action, the barricades. I cannot support it. It pits neighbors against neighbors. I think, I would hope that you folks would rescind this action and move towards something less intensive, like a sign on either end of Topaz, since we're talking about Topaz, that says this is a residential street, no through traffic, and then place policemen there for the first couple days of the commute. It would be exciting to have police presence in the Jewel Box. I would look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more yellow cards in the audience? Any more yellow cards? There we go.
Members of the City Council, my name is Christy Donaldson. I have owned my house on 4725 Opal Street for 15 years, and I'm speaking on behalf of 5 of my neighbors on Opal Street. I'm here to ask that you restart the discussion about the Topaz Street residents-defined problem of traffic volume and safety on their street. I think the survey addressed a volume issue, but not the safety issue. I think the problem would best be solved by city staff providing thorough, well-informed recommendations based on factual evidence, historical data such as traffic counts on Topaz and other busy Capitola streets, and research into what defines a risk or safety issue could be examined. For example, I learned through a Google search that traffic counts on Topaz have remained the same since 2015. I also found that the difference between traffic around 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock is on average 9 cars a minute difference. I have yet to find evidence that supports 1 to 2 cars per minute justifies a risk or safety issue. I ask that the council question the supposed need to do something
Is there solid factual proof that there's a safety crisis on Topaz Street? And how can it be predicted that something is going to happen? I've traveled Topaz Street by foot and bike with my dog in tow almost daily during many different times of the day for the last 6 years, and I have never felt unsafe. As a matter of fact, 2 cars both slowed and waved me by today. Today, the average count of 1,200 cars is still well below 2,000 cars per day, which is the definition of capacity of a local street, as outlined in the 2014 City of Capitola General Plan. If the city believes that 1,200 cars is tolerable for a local street, then why are we considering changes to a street and its proximate streets with traffic that doesn't exceed this guideline? I strongly oppose any trial period with significant change, which will involve spending $50,000 to $100,000 on a problem that will address the volume by not necessarily a safety issue.
Thank you. Next. Welcome.
Hi, Ron Reed from Surf and Sand Mobile Home Park. I just got back in town after being out of town for an extended time, and I just saw the map of what's proposed yesterday. I can't see any solution that comes out of the way it's diagrammed right now. I do know that operating the Surf and Sand Mobile Home Park, all this traffic is going to funnel right down through my park. And I just can't, I've got to protect the tenants, and I can't let that happen. So whether it be I have to put security gates in with transmitters, if I have to, I will. But I can't support this the way it is. So. Okay, thank you.
Understood. Thank you, Ron. Next. Any other yellow cards? Seeing none? Oh, there's a yellow card. Really?
I timed it.
Welcome, Linda Smith.
Thank you. I'm Linda Smith. Mayor Termini and council members, I sent an email earlier today with a lot more detail, but there are a couple of comments I just think I'd like for you to hear before you deliberate. Now that you know how much it's going to cost to do a trial for this option, which was the one that garnered the most opposition from the greater Jewel Box, surely you understand that it would be very likely that it would push through to a permanent implementation unless there were some really extreme results. And I don't think you're going to get really extreme results, even though we're using the standard for doing the count. The greater Jewel Box folks know traffic patterns in more than just an allotted time. And the entire Jewel Box east of 47th would be required to utilize Capitola Road to get to South 41st Avenue for anything. It's already overburdened. It'll just make it worse. Please change your mind and let us go back to the discussion stage.
Thank you. Okay, last call. Yellow cards. Seeing none, we'll move on to the orange. Orange cards? Neil? I think Mick beat you to it.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Welcome, Mick.
Good evening, Mayor and council members.
Good evening.
First of all, I'd like to introduce the letter I sent to the city attorney on Tuesday to Linda for the record. I requested an opinion regarding some procedural errors at the last meeting, but unfortunately I haven't received a response. But I'd like to just briefly touch on those errors. Hopefully they don't mean anything, and the action taken tonight will render them null and void. First of all, at the last meeting, Mr. Bodaroff's motion, and these are his exact words, was, and I quote, that we adopt Plan 4 of the Planning Commission recommendation for a bollard presentation. The motion makes no sense, as the Planning Commission never recommended any plan. No Jewel Box traffic plans have ever been before the Planning Commission for any discussion or action. So what you approved doesn't even exist. Secondly, there was no approved trial period as it states in the minutes. You're required to amend your motion, and you can only amend the motion if the second withdraws. Mr. Bertrand never withdrew a second, so Mr. Bodaroff never was able to amend his motion. Also, that could have been amended by a subsequent motion, which was not done. So the action the council took was really done in a kind of a sloppy, haphazard manner, I think. Obviously it opens the door to a legal challenge, which I hope no one ever wants to go there for this, because I think the remedy is rather simple. Capitola has never been a community that rams ideas and decisions down people's throats. We've always solved problems collaboratively. We ask you to work with us to come up with some traffic solutions that mitigate the Topaz Street problems and are acceptable to the rest of the Jewel Box residents. And that's how Capitola has always solved problems, and that's how city government is supposed to work. Mayor Termini, my gut feeling is that you're on the hot seat tonight. And
I'm always on the hot seat.
Yeah. If there's a motion to rescind the council's action, it's my understanding it's going to take 4 votes, and you could very well be the swing vote here. You've met with Jewel Box residents and you've voiced your concerns with the barricades. You've led people to believe that there are other alternatives that are better. And we're just asking you, please don't let us down. Do the right thing and rescind the action you took on January 25th. Thank you.
Thanks, Mick. Welcome, Neil.
Nice to see you all again. Good evening. My name is Neil Savage, and I reside at 4650 Opal Street. First, I'd like to thank the City Council for your time this evening, but not just tonight, but for the considerable time meeting with the community over the past couple weeks. I know some of you have even camped out on Topaz to count cars. Tonight, I ask the Council to rescind its January 25th decision to implement Option 4 and ask that this be sent back to staff to reconsider smaller, more proportional solutions that focus on the few commute hours. I continue to believe that there is no significant problem on Topaz. This is not a traffic jam. These are individual cars going down a narrow street at a rate of 2 cars a minute. And I believe that no action is the right action. That Topaz has more traffic does not necessarily mean that Topaz has a significant problem. I remain fully in opposition to Option 4. It is overkill and unfair to double the traffic on West Topaz. I also implore you to make decisions based on the lifetime project costs, not just the cost of a 45-day study. If the future cost of Coastal Commission approval and permanent implementation will not be acceptable, then please don't waste money trying something out that will never happen. It's okay to say no to an out-of-proportion action. I've often heard about safety in the past 2 weeks. The higher volume of traffic on Topaz is not creating unsafe traffic conditions. There are just more individual unsafe cars. And redistributing individual cars throughout the neighborhood will make no difference in the overall safety in the Jewel Box. I believe that a higher volume is an inconvenience but not a safety issue, at least no more than every other street in Capitola without sidewalks. Just because we will feel safe more often with reduced volume doesn't necessarily mean that a reduction in volume is the best answer. If the issue is safety, let's clearly state that and address that problem and not use safety to justify volume reduction. As we proceed, please don't confuse redirecting traffic with reducing volume. I suspect the appropriate response will involve redirecting traffic, but with very little volume reduction. So please be open and honest about the impact to others when sharing the burden. I also strongly believe this is an opportunity to build community. We recognize we won't all get what we want, but by not even acknowledging our traffic survey input made it much more difficult for you to gain acceptance by the wider community. In conclusion, tonight I ask the Council to rescind its January 25th decision to implement Option 4 and to send this back to staff to recommend smaller measures focusing on the few commute hours. I ask the response to be proportional and the process inclusive. And I look forward to working with my neighbors so we can all enjoy a better designed and more livable Jewel Box.
Thank you, Neil. Next. Welcome. There we go.
My name is Jeannie Kalandi St. John. I live at 1465 47th Avenue, facing right out on it. Our driveway is right there. I wrote a letter a couple of weeks ago to the City Council, and the issues that we have with the barricades remain the same. My husband is a retired firefighter, and his first response was, wait a minute, that's going to make the fire trucks serpentine through. They can't go straight through. And fire truck comes up 47th every once in a while, but they will have to serpentine around. I don't think that's the most efficient way to go. And one of the things that he was noticing was the fire hydrants. And he said a hose lay cannot go over a barrier. But one of the fire hydrants that protects our house, in order to get the house behind us, the fire hose would have to go over a barrier. And that doesn't work. So we need to work with the fire department and the police, all first responders, to be able to get to areas within the community directly as possible. And really, 47th Avenue, there are times when the cars go too fast, I agree, but not that often. And I think the barricades are, I heard it earlier, a sledgehammer trying to get a gnat. In the event of an emergency of any kind where we had to get out, the only way we can get out is we can't go straight out 47th Avenue because there's barricades there, so we have to go either turn left out of our driveway and go down Garnett, or turn right out of our driveway and go down Jewel to 49th. This is going to force a tremendous amount of traffic onto Capitola Road and 49th. And how do you get to Portola? There's only one way. It's difficult to get through, and I understand that people want to cut through a neighborhood, but we have cameras, we can have signs, there are ways to do it. Another issue is the parking on a lot of the side streets, Garnett, Opal, Jewel, Topaz, all of those streets. There's parking on both sides of the streets, and many times when you're going down the street, you have to stop and let another car come the other direction. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board on this and look for other ways to calm the traffic and not use the sledgehammer. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Wait a second here. I got my little orange card.
Welcome.
My name's Dwight Dillon. I live on Jewel Street. I'm a lifelong resident of Capitola. And I want to reiterate what I said before. I think it's lame that the city council is pandering to a minority of people who weren't clueless enough to buy a house and not realize what the traffic was like on their street, that they were buying a house and maybe spending $1 million on it. So I hate to be mean, but I mean, man, talking about clueless in Capitola, give me a break. Also, I do not want city council to spend a dime on any more traffic, surveys in the Jewel box. It's, might as well just give it to charity. It would do more good, after all. And if you persist, I can just about guarantee you that there's going to be legal action against the city of Capitola. I mean, I'm not going to do it, but there's got to be at least some hungry lawyers in the Jewel box somewhere. That's like death and taxes, Anyway, you guys. The deal is this. It's really simple. The simplest thing is most times the best thing. The whole thing about keep it simple, All you really need to do is, put some officers and squad cars on those streets during peak traffic hours on 47th and Topaz, and that would take care of it. There was even a guy, I forget who that was. It was a guy in Santa Cruz that he used to take plywood and paint, make highway patrol cars and set them out by the freeway and stuff, and it worked, I don't know if it would work on Topaz. It probably would. My gonged out of here yet?
No, you're getting close, but go ahead. Don't waste any time. You'll see the hook coming.
So
It's all right.
anyway, it's not worth it. I mean, this lady over here told me that the library needs more money. If you want to take 50 grand and give it to the library, that would be a hell of a lot better deal all the way around for everybody. Seriously. Are you going to just put some insanely, heavy duty, speed bumps on Topaz or whatever? But I still think you ought to just have, I hardly ever see any police vehicles in the jewel box, I really think that would do it. Let people get, some tickets and happening. They would get on the internet in a minute, man. Everybody in Santa Cruz County would know not to drive down Topaz. As a matter of fact, I made a pledge, man. I pledge allegiance to not drive down Topaz.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, who wants to follow that? Okay, here we go.
I am a lawyer, but I'm not that hungry.
Okay, very good, very good.
I'm Dave Aaron. I live at 4980 Garnet Street. And I'd like to, good evening, Mayor Termini, City Council. I'd like to respectfully request that the City Council rescind the decision made on January 25 to bifurcate the neighborhood with barricades as described in option 4 and send the item back to staff for review recommendations for smaller, incremental, less burdensome alternatives that could solve the problem for our neighbors and friends on Topaz without overly burdening the rest of the neighborhood by bifurcating with barricades. So just a short comment, but I do want to help the people on Topaz, but I think there are other ways that we can do it.
Thank you. Next. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Kurt.
Come to the microphone, Kurt. We all want to hear every word.
My name is Kurt. I live on Topaz. I'm raising 2 kids here, and my wife's a teacher at New Brighton. And I do agree with most everyone here that we shouldn't spend money on something we really don't need, and there's a lot of stuff here that does need it. As far as the problem on Topaz, as far as safety and traffic is concerned, I walk through the jewel box a lot, and it's something that, as people who complain about 45th and 47th speed bumps know, there's really not going to be one silver bullet to solve any of this. And something that I think of as a person who lives on Topaz and seeing my friend here who lives on Crystal Street and seeing the benefits of having a one-way street and of how tight-knit their community, that block is, the one between 47th and 45th. I like that idea. I'm not bound to it, but I see the benefit of a one-way street there for the people of Topaz. And, I see some of my friends here who live on Opal as well. So I know from past meetings that I haven't attended but have heard feedback from that is kind of, our Topaz's problem becomes someone else's problem. But I like to hope that maybe our solution becomes someone else's solution. So I wish the best for us. We're all stoked, and this is kind of a first world problem to have. And I hope everyone is in a good mood when it all ends.
Thank you, and leave your card there if you would. Thank you. Next. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. My name is Dana Ingersoll. I live on Topaz Street on the corner of 47th. Thank you, City Council, for all the time that's gone into this. I'm sorry it's taken so much time. I'm sure we all have. We would all prefer to be home relaxing rather than being here. But I just want to reiterate the safety issue, which is what brought all of us who live on Topaz to you 3 years ago with this concerns, is that we're witnessing unsafe events on a daily level. It really is, Topaz Street really is the pedestrian route for people coming from 41st or that area towards Capitola Beach. Is you can cut through the park on half of Topaz, but the other half you really do have to come down Topaz Street. So that's affecting tourists, non-residents, people unfamiliar with the amount of traffic that's there. They walk in the middle of the street. Luckily, cars have seen them thus far, but that's our concern, is, of course, the width or the narrowness of the street and the speed of the traffic, the amount of the traffic. We all have had too many close calls, and that's really what we're focused on here. Also want to mention the Capitola kids who walk down, I think, 4 times a day, 2 or 3 months of the year, and they do not stay where they're supposed to, as you know, kids do. It really is the kids and pets that were most vulnerable. Just within the 3 houses close to me, we have 5 kids who are 4 years and under. There are a lot of toddlers in the Jewel Box, so it's good that all these kids will be riding bikes soon, but we want to keep it safe. Yeah, so we would like to see some action. The option 4 option was, I think, a surprise that passed for us. That was a great option for Topaz Street. People have very mixed feelings about it, given that we've all reconvened, and we would be very happy to see the option of a one-way street running westbound on Topaz Street from 49th to 45th go in effect. That would cut the afternoon commute, which is the most dense, and also the time where there seems to be more pedestrians coming through that street. And it would also decrease the pedestrian squeeze, which is really what we're getting with the cars, and the two-way traffic is where it gets really tight and of most concern. And I just want to mention this option people keep throwing out about limit parking on one half of the street. If any of the people could tell me where we would all park our cars, then maybe we consider that as an option, but I don't know where they would go.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, Mayor.
Hello.
Distinguished council members, my name is Anna Morocco. I live on Topaz Street. I wanted to give you a brief history of the events leading up to the recent traffic decision for the Jewel Box from the perspective of the Topaz residents. About 2 years ago, after witnessing a number of close calls and minor accidents on Topaz Street, we took our concerns to the Traffic Commission at the regularly scheduled public meetings. These meetings resulted in action only after the Commission scheduled an independent traffic count of some of the Jewel streets. Everyone was surprised at the 10-to-1 difference in volume. At the meeting after this independent survey, there was a discussion of alternative solutions and an agreement to hire a traffic consultant. There also were guidelines set out at this meeting that any solution should return the Jewel Box streets to their original designation. In other words, local streets for access and pedestrians, which are residential streets, collectors to direct traffic from these streets to the arterials, 45th, 49th, etc., and arterials for through traffic, Capitola Road. That solution should not only move through traffic, it should not move through traffic to other adjacent residential streets. That's not what Topaz wants. It was also noted at this meeting that any solution should try to avoid increasing the speed of traffic through the Jewel Box based on the police chief's comments that one-way streets usually experience higher than average speed. The consultants, Kimley Horn, presented their findings at the subsequent public meeting of the Traffic Commission, and the alternatives were reviewed and discussed. It was decided to further communicate these solutions to all Jewel Box residents via the questionnaire. We took one volunteer from each Jewel Box street to develop the survey. I'm not sure if all streets were represented. It's important to note that the survey respondents agreed that the safety issue was real. And we at Topaz think credit should be given to the council for doing a rather thorough job of communicating this issue and coming up with a fair solution. It's important to note that the city paid and received recommendations from a third-party vendor, and the additional expenses incurred in implementing these mitigation measures, whatever they may be, will be far less burdensome on the city coffers than potential personal injury, property damage, bodily injury, or even wrongful death lawsuits. As an officer of the court, I've seen these lawsuits. We would not be fulfilling our responsibilities as residents if we did not speak out and demand a solution for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Yes, you're up.
Yes. Hi, I'm Cherry Mcdonald. I live on the corner of Jewel Street and 47th, and we've owned the property for almost 22 years. We've lived there part-time during that time, full-time the last 3 years. And when we bought the place, It seemed like a quiet little corner. We spent a lot of time outside with our friends, doing that kind of neighborly thing where you chat or have a drink or a barbecue. This last couple of summers, that's been more and more impossible to do. In fact, on Sunday nights, we can't even enjoy television with the doors open if it's been a good day at the beach. There's so much traffic coming up 47th. And those speed bumps, thank you for putting them in, are now an obstacle course for the entertainment of our town visitors. Because a lot of them slam on their brakes and screech over them. Some of the big lifted trucks with things in the back speed up and hit them as hard as they can, and everything in the thing bounces. So it's been really an awkward, noisy, unsafe place. I don't let my grandchildren out. I'm constantly locking the gates and keeping them inside, which why live in a beach town if you have to be inside? So I want to thank you for looking at the traffic problem in the Jewel Box as a whole neighborhood problem and coming up with a solution for us. A lot of people who don't live right on 47th don't realize how narrow that street is or how tight the parking is on the Jewel streets themselves, like Opal, Garnet, Topaz. It's a neighborhood problem, but 47th is 32 feet narrower than 49th and 45th. And yet that's the one where the crossing traffic is, the railroad crossing. So everybody thinks that's a main street, a thoroughfare. And they come flying down there, and that's just ruining our quality of life in the neighborhood. I feel really bad about that. So I want to thank you for taking the time to consider all of the material that was done in the planning sessions, all the traffic studies that were done, and I'm just so disappointed we don't have more time. I think there's a lot of misconception about how this decision was reached and the impact that it has in the neighborhood because people don't understand that all of the woman just before me spoke about all the things done in preparation for the decision. I don't think that got communicated properly. I think if people understood that they had an opportunity a year ago and 6 months ago and 5 months ago to give their input. And so negative information has now been propelled on the neighborhood Jewel Box blob, and we're all, I'm dumbfounded where all of this opposition came from when there was so little participation in the surveys and at the meetings.
Thank you. Is there anyone left out there with an orange card? Rose.
Sorry, I have a letter to read from Karen Hayes.
Did you, hold on, excuse me, you had a yellow card and an orange card.
No, I had a green card and an orange card.
I'm sorry, one card per player. Have a seat, please. Rose, what do you got?
Okay.
Did I mention it was one card per person? I'm sorry.
Nice.
Welcome, Rose.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Rose Filicetti, and I live at 4650 Opal Street in the Jewel Box. Mayor Tamini and Capitola City Council members, thank you for your willingness to agendize this issue at tonight's City Council meeting so that more Jewel Box neighbors have the opportunity to speak to the issue. Thank you also for responding to letters, emails, phone calls, and requests for personal meetings with our neighbors, especially several of you who I've met with many times. Tonight, I'm asking you to rescind the decision on January 25th for option 4 and send the item back to staff for review and recommendations for smaller, incremental, proportional, and less expensive changes to address the issue of what I think is the volume of traffic on Topaz Street during commute hours, such as increased signage, time-restricted turns, and speed bumps. Please give staff direction to include the whole neighborhood in the process. This is an opportunity to bring the greater Jewel Box neighborhood together to discuss issues and possible solutions rather than put us at odds. Staff conducted a traffic survey, but many of us felt that our responses were not given serious consideration. I would prefer that neighborhood meetings are held as were originally promised to provide additional input and discussion by all of the neighbors in the Jewel Box. Please, please actively listen to our neighborhood. We want to be part of any decisions that are made. But again tonight, I'm asking you to rescind the decision made on January 25th for option 4 and send the item back to staff for review and recommendations for smaller, incremental, proportional, and less expensive changes to address the issue of what I think is the volume of traffic on Topaz Street during commute hours, such as increased signage, time-restricted turns, and speed bumps. Thank you very much for taking my request into consideration, and if you support such comments, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Rose. Molly, is there somebody in your group that'd like to deliver that message? There he is. You drew the. Excellent. Come on up there.
You guys don't want to do it. This is from. I'm Andrew Morocco. I'm from Topaz Street. This is from Karen Hanna, Capitola property owner, Capitola business owner, resident of Live Oak. She says, when I saw the traffic counts on Topaz compared to the rest of the Jewel Box neighborhood, it was obvious there was no exaggeration on the part of the residents. Two things became clear. One, I would not drive on Topaz to get to my neighborhood, and two, something needed to be done to alleviate the problem. I commend the city for doing a traffic study and seriously addressing this problem. Some in the neighborhood say that the people living on Topaz should have known what they were in for. However, that does not take into account consideration of the fairly recent app Waze, which is making life miserable to communities all over the U.S. by sending traffic into otherwise quiet neighborhoods, and no, they don't care and will not voluntarily make adjustments. The current plan will inconvenience people for a short period. However, in most cases, the people living in the Jewel Box will have to detour to their homes by only one block. As through travelers will find, it will be easier to stick to the streets designed to handle heavier traffic, and the whole neighborhood will see less traffic. This has worked in neighborhoods around the country. Friends in Berkeley in the same situation marvel at the way their once busy streets are now almost cul-de-sac, where the kids can be outside without fear of heavy traffic at commute time because it will only have local traffic. I am unable to attend tonight's meeting because I'm at a meeting with the county regarding their plan to send delivery trucks to my Live Oak neighborhood to service new development on Portola. So we all have to be vigilant and patient. What may now seem radical may be a blessing in disguise. I urge the City Council to try this plan for a sufficient amount of time to allow everyone to get used to the new traffic pattern.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with an orange card? John?
I'm going to be nice.
Well, you're always nice. Well, you're not really.
Okay, John Nickel. I live in the Jewel Box, but I never heard of the Jewel Box when I was growing up. I've lived in the Jewel Box since before Capitola was a city. I agree with those opposed to your Proposition 4. It's just where I am. Let's get to the speed bumps they're talking about that are on 49th, 5th, and 7th. My understanding, they are not speed bumps, they are speed humps, because at the time the fire department and others were opposed to speed bumps, which are more vicious and more slowing. So maybe we could have speed bumps. And I walk in that neighborhood. I walk the entire town almost daily, all weird hours. The only place I've ever really come very close to being run over is Hill Street and Cap Avenue, Hill Street and Bay. Two of us, I mean, on 4 occasions, I mean, we've brushed the car. And we, like I say, we walk every morning. I'm opposed to this. It divides the neighborhood. I think we've been hearing a statement now for about 3 years. Don't build a wall. We don't want a wall. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Next. Anyone else with an orange card, please step up. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Howard. My phone's broken, so hopefully my speech won't be I'm a long-term, full-time resident of Capitola and the Jewel Box. My children are third-generation Capitola residents. I have a long-term interest in the city. I do not agree with the assessment made on the street at Topaz and 47th and other streets. When you misdiagnose a problem, it is necessary to go back for testing. The solution is out of proportion to the overall issue. I believe that traffic has increased everywhere. This is not unique to Topaz. The individuals that purchased the properties at Topaz knew what they were purchasing, somewhat like Crystal, backing up to Capitola Road. There are pluses and minuses to each of these streets. These streets are positioned in a way that have lower cost initially to get in, as I recently considered purchasing a house on Topaz, and part of the assessment that I was making was where the location was. Would I wait for another house to come up elsewhere? There are perks financially and also in the location. I did do some research on the longevity of the current residents of Topaz, and I would like, that I did some research about it. That I would not like to make changes for owners that might likely flip the houses or have no future community interest. This was a big concern to me. From 49th to 47th, all but two houses have been purchased in the last about 6 or 7 years. There's one house that's a beach house, another house that's a rental. All the other residents, I hope that they're here for a long time, but that might not be the case. And these are going to be some big changes for the rest of the community. So I disagree with the previous statement made by the public safety. I also raised 3 kids on Prospect and Garnet. Prospect is like a speed zone. I mean, it's hilarious. I'm waiting for somebody to go off the street into Capitola Road. They go so fast. So I understand people that when they're worried about their kids, but we all have to lock our doors. We all have to parent our children. We all worry about safety. It's just an issue when you live in a small neighborhood or a big neighborhood. It just is an issue. I have consistently walked the Jewel Box since the last meeting. I have walked down to Topaz daily from 47th to 49th. I'm there from anywhere from a half hour to an hour. For example, Saturday was a beautiful day. I thought there'd be more visitors, things like that. In 45 minutes, there were 3 cars. I'm almost finished. I'm opposed to the barricades. I ask that you rescind this action. I strongly oppose the temporary barricades as well. I think the city did a great job in the planning to be able to go back and forth across the city from all points in Santa Cruz.
And your time is up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Welcome.
My name's Suzanne Murphy. I'm on 49th Avenue, and this is the 3rd or 4th meeting. We filled out that survey, which was not helpful and couldn't explain much. We've gone to the different meetings. A lot of people were very negative about many of these options, particularly this 4th option. And so when it was very apparent that it was a negative response, and then we turn around and here it is, you guys voted on it, and here we are. So I think that's part of the problem, because we don't feel like we're being represented by our council, and we really want you to stop and take some thought and some planning and some actual work on this. The numbers don't make sense for the amount of traffic that's there. Yes, Topaz gets a lot of traffic here and there, but likewise, we have gone through, we walk, drive, all kinds of things. We went through on Topaz at 5:15 tonight. We were the only car on it. I don't understand. I can understand the safety issue. I'm a parent. I understand. I was a school teacher. I understand that. But what is really, really hard is we've got 2 issues going, and you can't, brick up one to solve another and have all these expenses. This is a small town. It's got big ideas and big aspirations, and it's not Newport Beach. It's not, Los Gatos or wherever. You need to watch your expenses. $150,000 for people
to say, oh, you've got traffic on your roads. Does not make sense. Does not make sense at all. And temporary issues, I agree, have a way of becoming permanent issues. And I'm not going to take all the time, though I took this card so that I would have the chance to say it. But I think the speaker, everybody has their position. And there have been very good reasons and ideas and follow-through put out. But the important thing is $150,000, and if you vote for this issue, the bottom line is you're going to create traffic nightmares for the entire neighborhood, not just one street. You're going to reduce property values. You're going to slow down emergency response time. And actually, it's not going to help us, or it's not going to solve any problems. It's going to turn our neighborhoods, the glorious jewel box is going to get turned into an industrial-looking rat maze. And to have something come up and be put in place when so many people feel strongly, there are other options, and you have not really explored them all. So thank you very much.
Does anyone else have a card? Kathy Howard, you going to talk to us? I knew it. Come on up.
Thank you for listening. I have only lived here for 50 years, so that's all the input I have. And I've been an owner on Garnet Street for 30 years and have lived there off and on. I go there usually every other day to walk the streets with everyone else with their dogs and things like that. Down Prospect, which is a speedway during the summertime. And I have seen such a change in the personality of what has happened. And that is because we have so many more people that visit. We're kind of in conflict with the city. The city made us the most desirable beach to visit in Central California. We wanted tourists. We wanted money. We have it. We also have traffic. Our kids used to play in the streets. I really understand the grandparents who are concerned about their kids not being able to go in the streets, but we have a whole different culture that respects or doesn't respect. I would like you to respect the fact that we have lived there for years, we have maintained for years, and we have communicated together. And I do not think that number 4 solution was a good solution for what we're addressing. I would like to see you abandon that. And I would like to see us do maybe a one-way street or something. We do have to do some change, but we can't help that we are a town full of people. We can't complain because busloads come in that visit our beaches, that bring money to our retail. It is a larger issue totally, not just our neighborhood. But I certainly hope that you will not landlock that side of the street for safety reasons. I would hate to think that my grandkids or great-grandkids can't ride their bicycle down the street because it's barricaded. I think it's foolish, and I'm grateful that you're reconsidering. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Al Carlton, good to see you. A man who needs no introduction, but put your card in the box anyway.
I've been built my house 46 years ago on Jewel Street. I just want to go on record as opposed to the plan, and I'm opposed to any street barriers. The last time we put a barrier up in Capitola, I lost a lot of sleep. And the reason I lost a lot of sleep is Mancini's couldn't deliver my mattress. And you guys probably remember that. And we spent a lot of money putting the barrier in. Ended up the merchants were going to file an inverse condemnation suit because of loss of business. What did we do? We bulldozed the whole thing out, and we did it right. We opened the street back up again. It's the same results we're going to get in Jewel Box. So let's not waste the money. Dwight here is my neighbor. He said give it to the library. Right on.
Thank you, Alan. Somehow I knew that you and Dwight were partners. Anyone else with a card? Okay, we're going to close it now. And, there's a last worder. Make your way up here.
welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I won't take a lot of time, and that although I've got a 3-minute card, but most of the things have been said already. The issue that we have is not within the jewel box, it's cut-through traffic. You are not going to eliminate the cut-through traffic by putting in speed bumps or any other thing in there. If you can, I think it's, the cut-through traffic is something that we're going to have to live with in the neighborhoods there. It's coming about, it's come about already there, and that's all I've got to say. And I agree with those who say to rescind what you have done, and I think before any more money is spent by the City Council and the city departments in that, to advise us of how much you plan to spend to take care of facing the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. I see another orange card making their way up. Come on up. Welcome.
Members of the council, good evening. My name is Frank Borges. I have been in and out of Capitola for since 1950, and I now have been in permanent residency here for the last 10 years. And I live on Crystal Street. And one of the things that's unique about Crystal Street, I live on that portion of it that is one way. And the consequences of that is that we do have a little bit of control over the traffic, but very little. But one of the things that's unique about that street is that we have more children, I think, on that one street than any other street in the area, at least in appearance for me. I don't get out on the other streets too often, so I don't see them. But I wanted to say one thing about the people on that street. They're talking about children riding bicycles. We have had as many as 12 children at one time out playing in that street. And one of the things that's unique about it is that some of the parents are out and controlling traffic, and they have bought signs of their own and put out children at play and one thing and the other. I think that some of these traffic problems could be handled within the jurisdiction of the neighborhood by the mere fact of taking an action and going out into the street and controlling it a little bit. Take it upon yourself to get out there and yell at some of these people who are driving too fast. And if you don't get out and speak for yourself, well, nobody's going to do it for you. But I would encourage you people to really take a look at this thing, because spending money the way the Capitola does is almost as bad as Washington, D.C. And so there's some things that Washington we observe, that we agree that we don't want it to happen here. But I like I say, I think that take it upon yourself to help control your street.
Thank you, Frank. Anyone else with an orange card? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing, and before I bring it back to the council, and this is kind of a point of order, and Mick will appreciate this. You know, the word rescind and reconsider has been thrown about, and those words, because government is interested in every single word, have ramifications, and the supermajority and the word rescind, and there are a lot of mechanics going along with it. But Kathy Howard used the word abandon, and because we have now a financial benchmark on what this will cost, that's the kind of thing that just takes a majority to pass. So I'll bring it back to the council. Ed.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out again for what is definitely their second time, possibly their third. I want to thank everybody who's here who wrote a letter, and the numerous people who wrote letters to us with a wealth of information. Just a point of clarification, I want to thank the mayor for taking the time to meet with everybody and try to explain what goes on. But legally, by law, we're not able to engage in a conversation with you. At the meeting on February 8th, even though people came to the public comment period, we can't talk back with you about that because it's not on our agenda, so we can't have that conversation. So other than the meeting where we passed this on January 25th, This is the first opportunity we've had to engage with you as a city council. So I just want you to appreciate that that's how we have to operate. With that being said, I don't know this, but I sense a strong feeling of this council that we would like to start this process over again, to engage you, to take what you've said tonight and in your letters, to allow the council to weigh in. So the simplest way to do that is, I would like to make a motion right now to abandon the motion that we made at January 25th, so we're able to start over. So my motion is pure and simple. I want to abandon the motion we made on January 25th to adopt option 4.
Can a friendly amendment before it's seconded to abandon option 4 without any reference to removal or going backwards on what we did before, but just be abandoning option 4?
Pure and simple, abandon option 4 that we voted on at the meeting of January 25th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'd like to take a vote on this first, and then the council can weigh in on what the next steps would be. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Harlan?
Aye.
Councilmember Bertrand?
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
Councilmember Bottorff?
Aye.
Mayor Harlan? Oh, excuse me, Mayor Termini. I'm going back in time now.
Aye, and thank you very much. So, I will now bring this back to the council for consideration of what steps, if any, should be taken in the jewel box, and I'm going to turn it over to Vice Mayor Bertrand.
Yeah, staff, do you have the ability to bring up survey results? And I'm very interested in, yeah, that's the hard copy. I want everyone to see.
The entire survey results?
No,
or
just
specific?
item 15, the question 15.
The graph, Steve.
Yeah, the graph.
There you
There
go.
it is. Right. I think this encapsulates a lot of what we've been talking about. So I'll capture some of the words that have come up. We want to address safety and speed. We want to do the least intensive. We want to be incremental, not draconian. We want to be collaborative. We want to work together as a community. So I'll get to that point. So I'd like to make a motion to staff, come up with a proposal for city council. Take your time. I'm not in a hurry here. I want options that we could consider to deal with the problems that have been very well explained here tonight. I want Topaz addressed. I want things on 47th. I want a sense of what the tools we can use to address those problems. So my proposal is to have staff develop those options, come back to us in a due time, and then the second part of this proposal is I want a community meeting afterwards to get feedback. I want to know, when you see those proposals, what your take on them are. Because if I've talked to a number of people in the neighborhood, there's things I have never thought about, but the people who live there have. So it's a two-part proposal. Is that clear?
Just for more clarity,
Yeah.
would I add that I'm not looking for just city staff to conjure something up. I'd like this to be brought to Kimley Horn, and for Jock, if it's okay, as an adjunct to your motion, that an incremental plan take place that you can bring us that is in keeping with question
15. Right. So
is that clear to staff? Before I open it for a second?
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
My concern is spending more money on Kimley Horn. If we can't come up with the ideas ourselves, what other kind of crazy ideas are they going to come up with? I don't like the options they've come up with so far.
It's been moved and seconded, but under discussion, and to your point, Councilmember Harlan, we've taken some flack for trying to bodge things up from up here, and none of us are traffic experts, admittedly, and staff, while we have a great public works department, it's more or less cut and try. I'm not talking about a full-scale study. Staff, can you give us, Steve, some idea if Kimley Horn brings us a minimalist approach to this? And by the way, Jacques, I think we really need to consider 42nd Avenue as well, because they are in the greater jewel box for certain, and they have their own set of problems. Steve, what kind of costs are we talking about, and what levels of participation would Kimley Horn have?
First of all, just to address what Kimley Horn's done, we charged them with how to get traffic off of Topaz. That was the question I went to them for, without, and at the same time looking at not just pushing it onto other streets in the neighborhood. So again, I gave them focus because I didn't know how big to make that work. We were trying to just come up with some talking points at that point. So we spent $13,000, most of that's on traffic counts to get where we are today. To incrementally come up some, I would give us a range of $5,000 to $10,000 maximum.
So, clarification. So,
hold on a second. I'm seeing our city attorney raising his eyebrows. That always scares me. Speak to us.
Nothing scary. I just wanted to also inject a consideration, which is that when you do use a traffic engineer, the city can fall back on the design immunity if in the future there were to be an accident. If you were to, for lack of a better term, crowdsource your traffic controls, you wouldn't be able to rely on a similar immunity if something were to go down the road, so to speak.
Okay. Jacques, something else to say?
Yes. So what I was trying to put out there is what kind of tools could we use? I wasn't thinking of a full-blown traffic plan. Okay. So the idea is to get those tools down on paper that we could actually think of, and then go to the community to find out what actually makes sense from their standpoint. If we could come up with something that meets neighborhood vision of what they would like to do, then I think Kimberly Horn is the person to come to, or the group to go to see how it would work. And as the lawyer just said, that gives us immunity because we've done all the, we've looked at all the laws that are pertinent.
Right.
So
and
would that
so do you understand that Councilmember Bertrand is asking for, as many people have mentioned tonight, small incremental changes that might help us with the overall traffic problem that the greater jewel box suffers from?
Correct. I understand that.
Very good.
I would just like to add that my estimate of Kimley Horn and all that doesn't include any more traffic counting at this point.
I think that anything that takes place, and we have a baseline, anything that takes place going forward, we are going to, as a council, going to have to accept the responsibility of traffic counts to see if we've done any good, because without that kind of information,
right,
we're shooting blind here.
Right.
Something else to say, Ed?
Just a couple comments. You came here at the meeting on February 8th, made a lot of comments, and a lot of comments tonight, and I want to just clean up some loose ends that I think have developed over a period of time. There's, as I said, over 50 people wrote letters, and I took excerpts from all those letters, and there's a lot of things going on in the jewel box that I don't like, and what I feel is this divisiveness of jewel box versus Topaz. And I hope that after tonight we can kind of take a step back, because some of the things that are written in these letters are not the kind of things that we need to be talking about. There's no rich people that are living on Topaz that are trying to get off on anything here. The last gentleman that came up, is one comment that he made struck with me. He says, I live on Crystal, and lots of kids play on Crystal. And all I can think about is, if I lived on Topaz, I'd like my kids to play on Topaz too. So it's something that I think all of you in the jewel box are entitled to. Where the cut, one of the important things is there's one woman that came here and she says, I'm committed to not driving on Topaz again. And that's a big statement, okay? Because we all do it. I mean, there's neighborhoods in this town, there's people that when they don't want to drive through the village, they cut through Fan Barn. There's people that when they don't want to wait in line coming down Monterey, when they're picking up their kids at school, they're cutting through McCormick. And all this stuff evolves. Everybody learns these shortcuts, and what you're doing is you're impacting those neighborhoods. And so I want everybody to stop and think about, take another route. Because what I want to try to do is stop the cut through traffic, the commuters that are coming home. But think of yourself, when you use that little shortcut and you save 20 seconds to drive, on Topaz, imagine that it's happening to your street. And the other thing that, I'm losing my voice here, which might be a good thing. The thing is when we talked about Ballards, people come up and they reference when we talked about them, and there may never be a Ballard in the jewel box. But understand that I was a fireman for 30 years, and I drove over probably 200 Ballards in responses, because you just drive over them. They don't get in the way of the response. This council would do nothing to stop an ambulance, a fire truck, a police car from getting to your address. Nothing would be approved. So I think it's just better that these comments should subside for a while. You should allow this action that we're getting ready to do, try to come together as a jewel box. I know you're a tight community. You know, that there's no doubt that there's good blood in the jewel box. There's a good reason for it. And just remember that act like it's your street that's being impacted and support all your neighbors. And I hope we can come up with a good plan. Thank you.
Kristen, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have a couple. I just have a couple brief comments, and it kind of echoes what Councilmember Bottorff just mentioned. The first thing is I want to thank everyone for all your comments, your emails. I want to thank the 8 women and the 1 man that met with me in person to discuss this. Collaboration is important, and I will take collaboration and discussion over divisiveness and anger any day. And so with that being said, you know, I heard all the emails, I read all the emails, I heard all your comments, I understand what needed to be done, and I'm glad that we're moving forward. I didn't get move forward tattooed across my chest for nothing. It's something that really, you know, means something. That being said, as Councilmember Bottorff mentioned, I'm really hoping to see an increase in kindness as we move forward, because it's disheartening to me, to be quite honest, to hear people make somewhat sinister assumptions about their neighbors, that people are driving over the traffic counters up and down their street all day to up the number of cars, to suggest that people are trying to up their property value, or that renters aren't as invested in the community. I'm a 4th generation Capitolan, and other than my great-grandparents owning a business, no one in my family has ever owned a home here. And we've been here for 4 generations. And many of my age group have accepted that we will probably never own homes. I have accepted that I will probably never own a home. But when I had to move from Depot Hill to another neighborhood before I could find a home, I swore that I was going to occupy City Hall and put a tent in the parking lot if I had to, because I'm committed to this neighborhood, this community, even though I do not own property here. So I ask you to please have generous assumptions of your neighbors, that they care about their community, that they want safety, not that they're trying to up their property value or get something that no one else is going to get. Please try to have those generous assumptions and show respect for one another. Now, that's not to say that all of the interactions I was a part of or witnessed were, you know, sinister and hurtful, but I do ask that we move forward in kindness and working together. And then finally, I think the grass leaves are gone already, but I wanted to thank Jake. Are they still here? Oh, okay. I wanted to thank Jake.
There's a couple of grass leaves here.
Yes, because I'll say it every time there's a young adult that comes up to that podium. This town is theirs. The future is theirs. And to see them here making comments on things that, I mean, even when you're too young to vote, it really is important. And so please pass it on to him that I was very impressed that he got up to speak, and I appreciate it.
Very well said. Thank you, Kristen. And we're glad you don't have to camp out on the front lawn. Thank you very much. Stephanie.
Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry we put you through all this. I'm sorry that we didn't have enough conversation early on to hear all of your concerns, and that's why I asked the council to walk the neighborhood and talk to you, and we did, but the message didn't get through strongly last time at the last council meeting. So glad the message got through this time. There is hope. No decision has to be permanent. We can always change our minds. So thank you all very much for your patience.
Thank you, Stephanie. Jacques, do you have another comment?
Yeah, I was walking out during the break at the last meeting, and there was some conversation going outside of the city hall, and I heard someone say, we got to slap those city council people around a little bit, and then they'll listen to us. And I thought, well, you know, this is sort of something about what democracy is about. There's a give and a take. And I think I was in Neil's house, and I said, you know, there has to be attention. You know, we're not gods. You know, you're not the all-demanding public, but we have to work together. We have to listen to each other. There has to be attention to make this system work. I'd like to thank the people that have brought me into their homes. That doesn't happen all the time in this society. They brought me into their homes. I sat down in their living room, you know, walked through their home just to pet their dog. The whole works. You know, it was great having that opportunity to talk with people and share what their perspectives were. That happened all throughout this last week and a half, for sure. I'd also like to thank the leadership that has developed in the community. I think that is tremendous. The fact that people in this community of Jewel Box self-identified themselves to say, I'm going to get out there, talk to my neighbors, have meetings, insist that they write letters, insist that the community council members come and talk to us, that is tremendous. That's why I ran for city council. This city does that kind of stuff. It doesn't happen all over the place. It really doesn't. We need to be proud of ourselves. So that's why when I said in my motion, the second part has to be a community meeting. A lot of cities don't like to do that because they say it's dirty. It's hard to manage. I don't think so in this community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacques. I'll be brief. I want to make sure that we keep into consideration 42nd Avenue because it's the forgotten cut-through street. And also, we need to keep in mind as we're doing this that we do have a preschool right at Jade Street, and access to that preschool is important. The golden or the silver lining to this whole thing, and thank you for giving up evenings. Thank you for meeting with me. Thank you for coming to 2 meetings in a row, some of you 3 or 4. The silver lining is you probably got to know neighbors you didn't know, and you all came together and despite any bonehead actions that we might have taken, you've come together and you have participated in democracy. So I will call for a vote now of the question.
Mayor, may I quickly interject? I just want to make sure I have the motion clear that I'm going to develop a series of not necessarily plans, but options that can be implemented in different areas, bring that back to council, from which we will then kind of develop maybe some plans using Kimley Horn and then hold a community workshop.
That's correct. And, you know, as an aside, I think we should make the bar the CEQA test so we don't get into the big numbers, you know, and the big costs. Keep it at that threshold as a first go around to see where we're going.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Very good. Madam City Clerk, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Harlan?
Yes, if we keep the cost to Kimley Horn as low as possible.
That's an aye. Go ahead.
Councilmember Bertrand?
That's an aye, definitely.
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
Councilmember Bottorff?
Aye.
Mayor Termini?
Aye, it's unanimous. Thank you, folks. We'll take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, let us go to saving the best for last, budget.
Yeah.
We knew you were back.
Councilmember Bertrand.
Is on, break or whatever. So we'll let like one time on patrol.
Okay. Well done. Made it through. Okay, we will proceed with 9B, mid-year financial report, and our financial director is here to talk to us.
Thank you, Mayor Termini and council members. So just to get started here, I'm going to cover a couple of financial highlights at the mid-year. So sales tax continues steady growth at about 3.1% over last year. Property tax continues growth at about 5.5% over last year, and the TOT is slowing down but still at about 2.7 over last year. And those are all actual receipts versus actual receipts from last year, not budget to budget. Okay. So comparing the same time last year, our revenues are increasing a little more than we had anticipated, and expenses are increasing a little less than we had anticipated, which is always a good thing. So for a quick review of revenue, the first thing on there is the taxes, which include sales tax, property tax, TOT, and a couple other smaller ones. You'll see that we're only at 38%. The reason for that is sales tax comes in about a quarter behind, so we're kind of speculating on what it'll be. So the 38% is a little misleading. We're actually ahead of where we were last year by about 180,000. The second line up there, the licenses and permits, includes business license. Those are billed in December and paid in January. So I took a peek before the council meeting, and most business licenses are paid, so that revenue line item's right where it should be at this time of year. So to get into those, so sales tax year-to-date receipts are 116,000 above where we were at December 31st of last year. In our budget, we had only bumped up, by the time our actuals came in, our budget was only increased by about $36,000. So we have a little bit of wiggle room there, if you will, to increase the budget by about $75,000. The property tax and TOT, even though they have some increases in there that I mentioned, they're performing right where we had anticipated them and are right at 50%, so we're not going to recommend any amendments on those line items. This one I have up there just kind of as an interesting trend that continues. The parking revenue, as we added more meters, continues to go up and is offset by a reduction on parking citations, and that's been a trend for about 3 or 4 years now.
Good trend.
Which is actually kind of what we wanted. So in summary, sales tax continues steady growth, and staff's recommending to increase the budget by $75,000. Again, the property tax, TOT, and parking are right where we projected they would be, so no increases there. The other item that we're looking at is investment income. The LAIF rate has almost doubled in the last year, which it's not a big line item, but we're basically doubling our investment income is what we're requesting.
Don't get too excited, Mr. Treasurer. I know that makes you giddy. I'm sorry.
On the expenditure side, personnel, if you'll notice, it's significantly lower this year than it was last year at the same time. That's due mostly to paying off the pension obligation bond, which was charged to this category, so that's no longer on the books, and some significant salary savings from vacancies that we haven't been able to fill yet that I'll get into a little bit later. And then the contract services is another big line item that's a little bit over budget, but that's because we enter into contracts for the entire year in the first half of the year. So those are tracking about where we expect those to be. The other reason, the personnel, the other thing I should mention is over 50% budget. That is due to us prepaying the PERS UAL. If you recall, there was a $973,000 payment that we made in July rather than spreading it out over the whole course of the year, and we save about 3.5%. So in summary, we have decreases. We're recommending decreases on the expenditure side of $270,000. That includes $235,000 of wages, primarily in the police department for officers as well as parking enforcement officers. There's also the civil engineer, project manager, and public works remains vacant, so we are pulling that back by about 50% since we still haven't identified a candidate there. And then $35,000 for property repairs. We had a budget of $45,000. We haven't spent anything in that line item yet. On the other side, increases totaling $87,000 are broken down. That $6,130 is just kind of a true up for some back billing where Santa Cruz had short billed us, so this was just a catch up, so I was just kind of truing that one up. The $25,000 for junior guard is related to the requirement of having a beach captain, and then $56,300 for a police black and white vehicle, as well as $21,700 for an unmarked vehicle, and I'll get into those a little bit more as well. In addition to the, actually let me back up, I'm sorry. For the police vehicles, both of those vehicles were requesting to replace a year early. We've had 2 vehicles fail quicker than we anticipated. One, the black and white, we're requesting to pull that out of kind of some of the savings that we're realizing this year. On the unmarked car, we're just advancing that. We had that slated for next year, and we're just advancing it a year. So pay it now out of the internal service fund, and it'll reduce what we request next year. In addition to the budget amendments, we have some staffing changes that we're requesting. One is to convert 1 police officer position to a police sergeant for improved oversight over the investigations unit, as well as providing some redundancy and backup coverage when other sergeants are out, either sick or vacation. And then the second staffing change would be to shift the parking meter maintenance from the police department to public works. That was performed by parking enforcement officer. We had 3, we're down to 2 right now, so since we have this opportunity, we're suggesting a little bit of a reorganization there. It'll reduce parking enforcement officers from 3 full-time to 2 full and 1 hourly, probably less than 1,000 hours. It will increase hours for the mechanic. What we'll do is use a maintenance worker 1, to do the maintenance on the parking meters, and when he's doing that work, he'll be paid out of class, which is equal to the mechanic work. And then he also helps up in the courtyard on the vehicles as well. And then to make up for that in the summertime, we'll increase the hours for our seasonal public works crew.
I'd like to add a little bit on that. So historically, the parking meter maintenance has sat within the parking enforcement office division within the police department. And really what we've experienced over time is as we've transitioned from the old types of meters to these new meters, that the jobs have become much more of almost like a hardware tech job rather than just simply working on dials inside of a parking meter. And it became increasingly clear to us in the police department, Public Works, and myself that the job of writing tickets and the job of taking care of sort of high-tech hardware were really 2 separate jobs. And we actually have people within the city who are far more probably better fit for taking care of the parking meter hardware. So it was a transition that was probably due, and it was a really good time to make it take place. And the nice thing is I think it puts sort of the work in the wheelhouse of the different departments in a better way. And I think also makes things a little bit more scalable in that we're really staffing up in the summer in both the PEOs and public works crews when we really have the higher levels of demand.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So our intention would not be to hire that 3rd person.
So we actually would have a third PEO, but it would be a part-time, it'd be an hourly position, so it'd be a part-time position. So it would be focused more in the summer.
So we're still looking to do that, but just during the summer part-time?
Yeah, I believe the police department has, do you have somebody in background at this point? But it would be, we call them a 990 position, so it's a part-time, not a full 2,000 hour
Summer's
position.
fine, I just didn't know if it was going away completely.
It's not going away completely. We're looking at 50% of the time we're a part-time employee. Our goal is to, and we're in the recruiting process, and we have an internal candidate, one of our current explorers, who is very much interested in that type of part-time work. He's in the interview process. He just had his interview earlier in the week. He's been with the department as an explorer for several years. There are other candidates, 2 of them in the process, internal candidates, and we would like to get to a position to make a selection of one of those 2 candidates to fill that role on an hourly basis.
Right.
I have a question too, of the chief. In the past, we've had 3 code enforcement officers full-time. Is there not a need for that third person full-time?
We have had historically 3 parking enforcement officers. We believe there's a need for 2.5 in essence. We've done very well for the majority of the year with 2 hard-working parking enforcement officers. 1/2 of the time of the third position that is currently vacant was spent doing a lot of the technical work the staff is talking about, repairing the machines, and certainly there was a lot of that during the year that we had to slide over to the parking enforcement officers. And I'm happy that the revenue and the citations weren't impacted negatively with good work, but we think that this plan on an hourly basis will achieve the work and the product or workload and the service that we need from an hourly employee in conjunction with both Ben and Oscar.
Because a couple of years ago, we were down parking enforcement officer for a number of months, and the revenues went way down.
I know we've been down more than a few times over the last several years. Oscar just got back to work after a little bit of an injury, and we were able to overcome a significant revenue impact during his absence, and we're happy that he's back now. So that occurs, and we adjust our plans with a little bit more work from our CSOs, 2 of them, a lot of support from the patrol officers to make sure that we're not going backwards in that service side of our work.
Do you have enough coverage with the 2 CSOs, the community service
Yes,
officers?
we do.
Okay, so the cost related to those changes, comparing the top step of a police officer to the top step of a police sergeant, there's a difference in salary of about $21,000 and a benefit cost of about $4,000. So that would be the full impact if you approve this, once the new sergeant reaches the top step, but that'll take 3 or 4 years in theory as the officer goes from the top step down to probably, I think, step 3 is where they end up, and then work their way back up. Right now, if we were to approve this plan this year, the cost is only about $3,400 as we make the transition. On the public works side, so as we talked about reducing the parking enforcement officer, that cost or reduction would be $32,500, and then the increase on the public works side would be the difference between a maintenance worker 1 and a mechanic for half-time is $7,500 on the year. That grows in time as that person works up. Their step increases as well. And then the public works director, and I think it'll take about $10,000 of part-time help to kind of backfill on the maintenance side to maintain everything in the summer when peak vacation season. So going through there, if we were to make all of these changes, that frees up about $282,000 of fund balance in the general fund that would then be available for other things to be done. So we were looking at the library. So just as a refresher, our budget on the library is $13.1 million, almost 13.2. And then those funding sources that are listed there that total up to the $12,277,000, which leaves a gap of about $872,000, which is less than half of what it was as we went through the budget process for this fiscal year. So we are chipping away at it. So some of the options that we could consider, council could consider to close that funding gap is the $282,000 in general fund balance. There's $50,000 that we have budgeted in the Public Works Department for ADA compliance. We have not spent any of that money yet this year. So staff's thought was we could redirect that money to the library and do some of the ADA work at the library that will be required in that project as well. We also have 2 projects, the Hill Street project and the Esplanade Park project, that we used our staff rather than contracting out and realized significant savings on those projects. 42,000 on Hill Street, 92 on the Esplanade. Those surplus funds or remaining funds from those projects could be redirected towards the library if so desired. And then the senior exercise equipment that Councilmember Bertrand had asked for during the budget hearings, that we have not started that project yet, and we could at this point defer that to the following year, to next fiscal year, and reallocate those funds towards the library as well.
And one of the reasons why we're talking about the library, just as a refresher, is that we plan to be bringing the construction documents to the City Council for approval and authorization to bid coming up in April, and then getting bids through May, and then returning, assuming the bids come in on target, to authorize a construction contract in June. So the time is nigh for us to come up with the funding for the library. The cost will be going out the door over a period of time down the road, but I think before we authorize the construction contract, we want to have a very clear plan about where the money is going to be coming from. So these funding sources will be important pieces of closing the gap. And do you have any more?
Quick question for you, just quick math. That means our shortfall in the library, if we do accept these, would be about $350?
Yeah, that represents just slightly over $500,000. So I think it's 506. So that would leave us right at 350, which is much more manageable going into the next fiscal year.
Thank you. Do you have anything else for us?
Just the only thing is this did go to the FAC on Tuesday, and they approved or moved forward for council the mid-year budget amendments as well as the staffing changes. And we had quite a discussion on the list of funding options, but at the end of the meeting we settled in on just leaving the list as is.
Mr. Treasurer, do you have any comments?
The only thing I'd like to point out is, there were some earlier speakers talking about, they seem to be skeptical of the government and how we spend our time and money and all that. And so I'm looking at the list, and I could see that someone might misinterpret some of those budget items as, oh, well, you're robbing Rispin Park budget for the budget, or you're robbing this to pay Peter to pay Paul. And that's not what's going on here, right? I mean, we've got surplus because we were efficient for the most part, and we were able to do the job that we committed to, and the surplus money is what's available then now to move to the library, and that's basically what we're doing here. We're not robbing funds that were already committed to these projects.
Thank you. Chief, could I ask you a question? Could you speak just a little bit on your plan to have a fifth sergeant and what that really means for your deployment, the operation of the police department?
Thank you. I'm excited to speak about that, and I'm excited about the opportunity to make some, I believe, needed changes with this fifth sergeant on the police department. So I want to talk about some operational opportunities that would provide. And the first one I want to mention, I'm going to direct it to Councilmember Bertrand, because I look forward to the presentation in the future, potentially near future, about some of the work we're doing with the County Office of Ed and the local schools as it relates to threat assessments on school and school violence. This position, not suggesting it's the priority, but this position will allow for that sergeant, one of the assignments, and there are many assignments for the sergeant, is to be a member of the threat assessment team with New Brighton Middle School and with the school district. Currently, we have a liaison in the department. Our city is so small that we don't have a need for an SRO. Larger cities, of course, do. That SRO fills the role as the threat assessment team member with school admin and staff. They do quite a bit of work. So for us, this fifth sergeant position would allow for us to fill that assignment as well. But here's my vision for the work, and I'll try and give some explanation as to why I think this is the way to go. As Jim mentioned, staff mentioned, the technical designation of the fifth sergeant is the investigative sergeant. Our criminal investigations unit has 2 detectives. It has not had a sergeant, has operated with 3 detectives in the recent past, and not had a sergeant for quite some time. Most of you probably are aware and appreciate the need for a team leader for a lot of our work, certainly in patrol with patrol sergeants, but as well in investigative work. We had a couple of incidents shortly after I arrived here during the year that the city and the police department specifically was fantastic in our response. But there were times during both of those incidents where the rotation of one team leader or sergeant to the next sergeant, simply because we didn't have an investigative sergeant to be the team leader, potentially could have impacted in a negative way the ability to solve those crimes. Both the murder-suicide just outside the mall on a busy Sunday afternoon and the stabbing that we had on Clare Street about 6 months ago. And so that position and that person filling that job, their responsibility will be to manage critical incidents such as that. Also really important, we don't have the 17 numbers in for crime numbers. They're probably a month away or so. But in 2016, we had 760 crime reports in the city of Capitola. We didn't have a sergeant to come in on a Monday morning to triage or to assign those reports to a detective team. And so from a management perspective, that's a breakdown. There's a need for that. It lies on the shoulders of a detective to do the best that he or she can and divide up the workload. But in reality, it's a very technical aspect of a sergeant's duty as an investigative sergeant, because that person is responsible for reviewing the reports as they come in on a Monday morning, triaging the ones that are priorities, those that aren't. And then also very, very critical is identifying, especially property crimes, reports that are incoming. Is there a nexus to others that we're working on? And if so, it makes sense to give that report to the detective that's already working the previous reports to see if there's a relationship. So that's really important. The other thing that staff mentioned is due to needed time off, occasional injuries, and extended leave for training, et cetera, for our sergeants, currently 4 total sergeants, there were times during, as an example, during a 7-day work week, we work on a 2-team system. One team works Sunday through Wednesday, team 2 works Wednesday through Saturday. They have an overlap period on Wednesdays. There's 2 sergeants per team, day shift, evening shift, to kind of simplify it. Due to authorized time off, there were periods of time during the year, too many for me as a police chief, where a team 1 sergeant and a team 2 sergeant would be off. And so we're operating on a 24-hour basis, 7 days a week, covering the field with only one sergeant, leaving us with a 14-hour period, too many times during a 7-day period where we had no patrol sergeant coverage in the field. Sure, we're all available by phone. My preference is to have that sergeant in the field. With this position and the relief component of this position, we can bridge that gap significantly, which is really important to me. We all know that when things don't go well for police departments, risk management or liability, the first thing they ask is, where was the sergeant? And so my goal is to decrease the number of times where we don't have that sergeant in the field with this type of a proposal.
And Chief, that was very good. I appreciate it. And I want to take this opportunity that you recently had a pretty high-profile perpetrator who was arrested by our department without incident. That's the gold standard of police work. Thank you.
It's absolutely our
first class.
Thank you very much.
Jacques.
I totally understand what you said about the need for a sergeant to be out in the field. I've been out in the field on a ride-along and seen the difference a well-qualified sergeant, of which we have 4 right now, makes in a particular situation. Totally understand it. And I'm glad you do ride-alongs, because that's why I know that. Yes, I do understand where the 5th sergeant might go, and that's why I would like to meet with you later. I am very happy to see that you're committed to working with the youth violence program.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very good. Seeing no one in the audience, we can bring it back to the council now.
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Did we ever get a generator for this building when the power goes out? Did we hook up to the generator?
Oh, we have one, but
Hi.
One at my house, we could plug that in.
Should it be better than what we did?
The answer is the only generator we have on site now powers up just the police department and the computer server. So the rest of the building does not have an emergency generator.
Don't we want to have it here too?
In the best world, yeah, absolutely. It's probably I guess $75,000 to put something like that in that would service the whole building. And finding a location that's out of the floodplain, which is where we'd want it, you know, it becomes a significant adventure or project that we haven't had the direction to undertake at this point.
I think it's something to think about. I think having the whole building available, if the power's out, could be advantageous in an earthquake if we end up using this building for something.
Don't we have a emergency center in terms of earthquake or other issues? Does that center have?
Does Jade Street have a generator?
So Jade Street has an emergency generator hookup where we could rent one or use connections with the County Santa Cruz Sanitation District, who has quite a few generators, portable generators. It's all set up. We have the plug up at the wire in a generator, a portable generator, quite quickly at the community center.
Well, I'd like to have something in place because earthquakes are not if, they're when. And we're overdue for another big one, the geologists say.
Yeah.
And I'd like us to be as earthquake prepared as possible, our residents and city government, so we don't have problems. And we spend a lot of money on a lot of things, but I think having a generator, I mean, it's up to the council, but I think it's something we should think about and maybe put in this year's budget to be prepared when we have another big earthquake. I thought that one was big, but they're saying that the next one's going to be even bigger because it'll be longer and do a lot more damage. And we need to be ready. We don't want to have a surprise if we have an earthquake this week or next month. We want to be ready with, flashlights and all sorts of things, but also just power because people are going to come here, looking for shelter probably or something.
Very good. Thank you.
Just 2 points along that. Number one is we do have a permanent generator going in at Jade Street as part of the police antenna project, so we will have generator power there. And it is something we can certainly talk about in next year's budget. We'll be preparing that in the next couple months, so we can talk about whether or not we want to get a generator here that powers the entire building.
Council members, any other comments, or is there a motion?
Motion to accept the mid-year report.
And could you go to the next slide? Could you go to the next slide, please? There it is.
So the recommended actions are to approve the budget amendments that I went through, authorize the staffing changes, and then provide direction to staff on which, if any, of those options for closing the funding gap on the library you'd like us to.
Okay, I'll add that to my motion, the three as listed.
Okay, I didn't know if we were going to prove it. I'd like to.
Well, no, we can have a second for suffice to.
You could second it.
I will second it for discussion.
Okay.
And Ed,
I would like to have some discussion on go back to the list. The dollar, because you're talking about, is it the third one? Whatever the.
Which list? I'm sorry.
Go to the next one that you had, the three choices, because I only have concerns about
the slide you were on initially. There we go.
Approve the funding. See what you said there. Approve the funding list. Go back to that list that you have the numbers. That's what I want to talk about. Because I'm okay with the 1 and 2, but the approve on this.
Approve the staffing changes?
Yeah, approve the mid-year budget amendments. Approve the staffing changes. Now it's approve the list of library-funded options to consideration. That's right. So go back to that list, because now what we're talking about is whether we're going to allocate all of this money into pay down the library. That's what you're getting ready to vote on.
Right.
And I'm not really comfortable with that at this point. Mr. City Manager, I appreciate your desire to want to bring that number down to the 350 because you might think that's a manageable number. But I would like to hold back on some of this money for at least another month. And I want to know what kind of impact that puts on you for what we're doing. Is that going to hold up what we're trying to approve?
How much of the money and why?
For future things that I want to bring into consideration. I think there's some things, Stephanie brought up that she has a concern about a generator. I have some concerns about some issues, and I think there's some things that are going on right now that I would like to hold back $100,000 from the general fund account. And I just want to know how much, do you need us to authorize this tonight? Is that imperative that we authorize that fund tonight? And what's the last final day that we can authorize that?
So, simply answer your question, no, we don't need to have all of this authorized to the library tonight. The last and final date, my recommendation to the council would be on the date that we approve the contract, which will be in June, we need to have a very clear plan about how we're going to fund that contract for construction. We have a cost estimate today of what that's going to be. But I can tell you, and as you know from experience, the bids will differ. So whether or not you allocate all of this, a portion of this to the project at this stage, isn't super critical, and we can hold off on it. But come that June 16th meeting, I think that's the date, when we're scheduled to authorize the bid, construction contract, we have to have a very clear plan about where the money is going to come from to pay for it.
I'm okay with this as a proposal. I just don't think we need to do it tonight. And if the fact is that you were stalling till June, I mean, I would be comfortable with doing this in April. But I just think there's some things that are going on right now, and I have some things I want to consider. Possibly I might consider that it's important to have a generator in this building. It just came up tonight, and I haven't had a chance to think about it. But I know that I know that when we lost power in this building, it was not a good feeling. So I understand the commitment to the library, but I sit here as I said, you know, the library vote has already been done. We've decided that, and our commitment is to try to come up with that money, and we're doing a pretty good job of paying that down. But along the way, there's projects in this town that are just not getting done. I'm not prepared to present those tonight, so I just would like to stall for till April before we just allocate that money to the library.
Well, let me speak in favor of Jacques' motion that I seconded. Sure. And that is, we're not spending this. We are earmarking it to the library budget, so the money's not gone. If things do come up and the big one does hit, we do have contingency emergency reserves. And we're also coming into a new budget. So I don't think it's deleterious to our interests to earmark this to the library budget, because again, it's not money that we're writing the check on, it's money that we're putting into that library fund. And if something disastrous does happen, we have it to draw on, and we don't even have the bids yet, so the money is just sitting there waiting for us. I don't think there's any reason not to take the staff recommendation. Stephanie.
Well, Jacques has his hand up first.
Oh, yeah, but Jacques talked already. I was going to let you go.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to ask the treasurer if he has any good ideas where we're going to get the other $350,000. That's the big question. That's the elephant in the room, besides this. I mean,
so we do have emergency funds and contingency funds that we could always tap into. So, that's the kind of thing that we want to save for the PERS emergency, and there's a lot of reasons why we were trying to keep a nice big buffer in our funding. But that's I keep hoping that these bids are going to come in low, and that I'm talking to the mayor, and he says we've got $1 million contingency in this portion of the library fund and another inflation contingency here and there. I'm hoping that you'll come in under budget still.
And I might add that we have 18 months to spend this money. Remember, we were going to fund 100% of the library in 2 years, and we're only 1 year out at this point. So it's true we're rushing to complete it, but it gives us the luxury of saying, okay, that's all there, $350,000. And by the way, I anticipate the community rising to the occasion, and we're going to get considerably more than the $350 they said they were going to raise. I think we're going to see at least half of the shortfall come from the citizens.
well, I'm all for waiting until April too, because there might be some other things we might want to talk about.
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
You may do that.
I'd like to make a substitute motion that we allocate money in all the funds with the exception of the general fund allotment of $282,000. We leave that where it's at.
Second.
Okay, we have to consider and vote on the substitute motion first before we consider the motion that's on the floor now. So let's get a roll call on the substitute motion, which is to not put the $282,000 into the general fund. Jacques?
Would the motion originator accept a amendment?
What's that amendment?
Okay, you suggested 100,000.
No, I changed the motion to all the funds, just so we could wrap it up. The bottom four funds would all go into the library account, but to hold the $282,000 in the general fund.
Okay, so I'm trying to help you out here. Okay,
he changed the 100,000 to 282.
Started with 100,000, and when I made the motion, I changed it to 282.
Yeah. So when you said 100,000, I was thinking you had a better idea of what you were thinking about, and so I was willing to support that. Then increasing 182, sort of.
So you're saying you're keeping that 282. That's the motion.
282, yeah.
Okay, so I'd like a roll call vote on the substitute.
City manager's got his hand up. I don't know if he's
substitute motion first. That is the procedure.
Yes.
The substitute motion would be considered first. I guess the one, I don't want to interrupt the voting process here.
Quite all right.
But the one factor to consider is that when we were developing the plan several years ago, a year ago, I think, about how we were going to pay for the library, one of the options on the table was that we were going to finance it. And we've done a very good job of setting aside money to do that without financing. And so I guess one of the things I want to just sort of to open up the book into my thoughts on this is that with this allocation, I was thinking we've narrowed the gap to $350,000, and assuming the bids come in on target, we're not financing the project. And it's sort of an important watershed moment, if you will, because it means that we're not going to be going out looking for that debt financing. The $282,000 not being allocated to the project starts to, leaves the gap at around $500,000 or $600,000, and that's sort of borderline threshold where we still could consider some sort of short-term loan. So it keeps that door sort of open. So when you asked me the first time around, what do we have to allocate the money all tonight? The answer is no. But what it does do is it would be good to know whether or not the council is thinking, look, let's look at debt financing for that remaining gap, or let's just continue down this path and continue to set aside money as it comes up for the project.
And before we take the roll call vote, I'll make a final statement. I'm not going to support this. And again, it's because we're not spending this money. We're setting it aside. And I have to agree with the city manager. So at that point, roll call vote.
Substitute motion, Councilmember Harlan.
I'd like to have more discussion on financing because we really haven't had that discussion.
Right. So it's aye.
Okay, thanks. I need to. We've got several. Let me just know which one I'm writing. Bertrand?
I'm going to vote no. The reason why is
we cannot editorialize on our votes. Once it gets to voting, it is just voting. I will remind everyone.
Councilmember Peterson?
No.
Councilmember Bottorff?
Aye.
Mayor?
No. We will now go back to the original motion from Councilmember Bertrand, which was to allocate all of these funds to the library fund at this time. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Harlan?
No.
Aye.
Thank you. Peterson?
Aye.
Bottorff?
No.
Termini?
Aye.
That motion passes 3-2 with Bottorff and Harlan opposed.
Thank you.
May I make a statement now?
Now it's time for statements.
Okay. So Ed, I was willing to listen, and I understand that there could be other things that you had in mind. I was almost ready to support you, but I didn't know what those were. And then when you went to 282, I was saying, it just seemed like that was too much of a jump. So at next meeting, if there are things that we could probably address, that we could get agendized, that we need to deal with, I would appreciate that. And I have no problem with that.
We have many more budget hearing meetings. So.
Yes.
We do.
Yeah, we'll be talking about money for a long time.
Yes, we do. That's just a start.
And
I gave up on my senior exercise equipment.
And all the seniors appreciate it. Thank you.
No, they don't.
Now we can go back to watching television. So, speaking of which, I want to thank Lynn Dutton, who is our tech in the booth. Thank you, Lynn. I neglected to do that at the beginning of the meeting. This meeting is now adjourned. Good night, Capitola. Be nice to each other.
Amen.